Tonight, we will go on a journey into the heart of Zen Buddhism and discover life-changing lessons and tales that have guided seekers toward peace for thousands of years. These ancient Buddhist teachings are not merely stories to occupy your mind as you drift towards sleep, but profound doorways into understanding your own deepest nature. Each teaching and tale we explore together carries within it a transformative key that can unlock the prison of a restless mind, revealing the vast, quiet space that has been waiting patiently within you all along. As you settle into this moment, feel the weight of your body being held by whatever supports you. Notice how you don't have to remember to make your heart beat or consciously direct your breath. These rhythms of life flow through you effortlessly, part of a deeper intelligence that knows exactly how to sustain and nourish you. This same intelligence knows how to carry you into rest. If only you can step aside and allow it to work its quiet magic. Our journey begins with one of the most fundamental insights of Buddhism, the recognition that much of our suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from our resistance to what happens. This understanding opens like a gentle flower in the famous teaching of the empty boat. Picture, if you will, a man who finds great peace in rowing his small boat on a tranquil river. Each evening, as the sun paints the sky in soft colors, he takes to the water. The gentle rhythm of his oars creates small ripples that expand in perfect circles. And for these precious moments, his mind is as calm as the water's surface. This is his refuge, his sanctuary from the demands and noise of daily life. But on one particular evening, as he paddles in quiet contentment, he notices another boat heading directly toward him. At first, he calls out politely, "Be careful. Please change course." But the approaching vessel continues straight toward him. His peaceful evening begins to fracture as worry creeps into his mind. "Move aside," he speaks more urgently. "You're going to crash into me." Still, the boat comes closer, unwavering in its path. Now his mind fills with indignation. How can someone be so careless, so inconsiderate? His entire being tenses with anger as he prepares to unleash his fury on this reckless boater who has destroyed his tranquil evening. He grips his oars tighter, his jaw clenches, and righteous anger burns in his chest. Finally, the inevitable collision occurs, but as he turns to confront the person responsible for ruining his peace, he discovers something that stops him completely. The boat is empty. There is no careless boater, no inconsiderate person to blame. The vessel had simply broken free from its mooring and was drifting with the current, following the natural laws of wind and water. In that moment, all his anger dissolves instantly. How can you rage at an empty boat? How can you take personally the actions of wind and current? He sits there, feeling almost foolish for all the energy he had spent in fury over something that had no intention behind it whatsoever. This simple story contains a wisdom that can transform how we meet every challenge in our lives. The Buddha taught that we will not be punished for our anger, but by our anger. Every moment we spend in reactive fury is a moment stolen from our peace, regardless of whether our anger is justified or not. How often do we encounter empty boats in our daily lives? The driver who cuts us off in traffic might be rushing to the hospital with a family emergency. The co-worker who's snapped at us might be struggling with a loss we know nothing about. The friend who didn't return our call might be overwhelmed by their own troubles. Yet, our minds quickly fill these empty boats with assumptions of malice, carelessness, or disrespect. This teaching invites us to pause before we react, to consider the possibility that what feels like a personal slight might simply be the drift of an empty boat, circumstances beyond anyone's control, carried along by currents we cannot see. When we can remember this, we free ourselves from the exhausting burden of taking everything personally. As your breathing naturally deepens, allow this wisdom to settle into your awareness. Feel how your body can soften when you release the need to defend against empty boats. Notice how much energy becomes available when you're not constantly braced for conflict or offense. From this understanding of empty boats, we naturally flow into another profound teaching that shows us how to find peace, even in the midst of unavoidable difficulty. This is the story of the monk and the tiger, a tale that reveals how presence itself can be our greatest refuge. In this story, we meet a peaceful monk who loved to walk in the mountain forests surrounding his monastery. These walks were his meditation in motion, a time when he could feel deeply connected to the natural world and to the present moment. The rustling of leaves, the songs of birds, the play of light and shadow through the trees. All of this nourished his spirit and deepened his practice. But one day, his peaceful walk took an unexpected turn. As he rounded a bend on a narrow mountain path, he heard a sound that froze his blood, the roar of a tiger. Before he could fully process what was happening, he saw the great cat charging toward him through the underbrush, its eyes locked on him with predatory focus. His first instinct was pure and simple. Run and run he did, his robes billowing behind him. As he sprinted down the mountain path with the tiger gaining ground. In his desperation, he spotted a sturdy vine hanging down the side of a cliff. Without hesitation, he grabbed hold and swung himself over the edge, hoping to find safety below. But as he descended, clinging to the vine, his heart sank. Looking down, he saw another tiger pacing at the bottom of the cliff, as if waiting for him to fall. He was trapped between two tigers, one above, one below, with nowhere to go. As he hung there, suspended between these two dangers, something remarkable happened. His eye caught sight of a small wild strawberry growing from a crevice in the cliff face just within reach. The berry was perfectly ripe, a tiny jewel of red against the grey rock. In that moment, instead of being consumed by terror about his situation, the monk reached out with one hand and plucked the strawberry. He placed it on his tongue and bit down gently. The taste was exquisite, sweet, tart, perfectly fresh. For that brief moment, all that existed was the pure experience of that strawberry's flavor. Despite being caught between two tigers, despite facing what seemed like certain doom, he found a moment of perfect peace and presence. He had discovered something that no external circumstance could take away from him: the capacity to be fully present to what was actually happening right now, rather than being tormented by what might happen next. This teaching speaks directly to our modern predicament. We all hang between tigers, the regrets and wounds of our past above us, the fears and anxieties about our future below us. These tigers are real, and they can feel very threatening, but the strawberry of the present moment is always available to us, offering its sweetness even in the midst of our most difficult circumstances. The Buddha taught that we suffer not because life contains pain that is unavoidable, but because we spend so much time, mentally time traveling away from the only moment we actually have. The past is a collection of memories that exist only in our minds. The future is a collection of possibilities that exist only in our imagination. But this breath, this heartbeat, this moment of awareness, this is real. This is yours. This is where peace can always be found. As you rest here now, feel into your own present moment, strawberry. Perhaps it's the sensation of your head against your pillow, or the rhythm of your breathing, or simply the quiet, knowing that you are safe in this moment. You don't have to solve tomorrow's problems or undo yesterday's mistakes. Right now, you can simply be here, tasting the sweetness of existence itself. This presence that the monk discovered is always available to us. But it requires a gentle discipline, the practice of repeatedly returning our attention to what is actually here, rather than being carried away by our mental tigers. Each time you notice your mind has wandered to worry or regret, and gently guide it back to the present moment, you are strengthening this most precious capacity. The teaching of presence naturally leads us to another fundamental insight of Buddhist wisdom, the understanding that much of our suffering comes from adding unnecessary layers of distress to unavoidable pain. This is beautifully illustrated in the teaching of the two arrows. Imagine the Buddha sitting peacefully with his students in a forest clearing. The light filters gently through the leaves. Birds sing in the distance, and there is an atmosphere of deep tranquility. A troubled student approaches with a question that many of us might ask. Master, why do we suffer so much in this life? Pain seems to follow us wherever we go. The Buddha's response is both simple and profound. He asks his student to imagine being struck by an arrow. This arrow causes pain, and this pain is unavoidable. It is what he calls the first arrow. This represents all the inevitable difficulties of human life: illness, loss, disappointment, the natural challenges that come with having a body and living in an uncertain world. But now the Buddha continues. Imagine that immediately after being struck by the first arrow, you are struck by a second arrow. This second arrow does not come from outside. It is created by your own mind. It is the anger about being in pain, the fear that the pain will never end, the story that this pain means something terrible about you or your life. The Buddha explains that while the first arrow is unavoidable, the second arrow is optional. The first arrow is the natural pain we all experience as part of being human. The second arrow is the suffering we create through our mental reactions to that pain, our resistance, our story making, our refusal to accept what has already happened. This teaching can be life-changing when we really understand it. So much of our distress comes not from our actual circumstances, but from our thoughts about our circumstances. When we experience physical pain, we often add layers of mental anguish. This shouldn't be happening. What if it gets worse? Why me? Each of these thoughts is another arrow, creating additional suffering on top of the original discomfort. The same pattern applies to emotional pain. When we feel sad, we often become sad about being sad. When we feel afraid, we become afraid of our fear. When we make a mistake, we compound it with harsh self-judgment, layer upon layer of second arrows, until the original pain is almost buried under our reactions to it. The Buddha's invitation is revolutionary in its simplicity. Feel the first arrow fully, but decline the delivery of the second. When pain arises, physical or emotional, can you meet it with acceptance rather than resistance? Can you experience sadness without the additional story that you shouldn't be sad? Can you feel fear without being afraid of your fear. This is not about becoming passive or indifferent to your own well-being. It's about recognizing that resistance and mental struggle rarely solve anything, and almost always make our experience harder than it needs to be. When you stop fighting with reality about what has already happened, tremendous energy becomes available for responding wisely to your actual situation. As you lie here now, notice if there are any first arrows present, any physical sensations of tiredness, tension, or discomfort. Instead of immediately trying to change these sensations, or telling yourself stories about why they're there, see if you can simply let them be present, without adding the second arrow of resistance. Feel how your body naturally knows how to carry you toward rest. Even if the day has left its marks on your muscles and nervous system, you don't have to be completely comfortable to find peace. You can be at peace with whatever level of comfort or discomfort is here, trusting that sleep will come in its own time, in its own way. This teaching of the two arrows connects beautifully to another fundamental insight of Buddhist wisdom, the universal nature of loss and change. This understanding can transform our relationship with life's inevitable difficulties, helping us see that our struggles are not signs of personal failure, but part of the shared human experience. There is a deeply moving story about a young mother named Kisa Gautami, whose beloved child fell ill and died, overcome with grief. She could not accept this loss. From house to house, desperately seeking someone who could bring him back to life. Person after person turned her away, gently, telling her that nothing could be done. Finally, someone directed her to the Buddha, suggesting that his great compassion and wisdom might offer help. When she found him and pleaded for her child to be restored to life, the Buddha looked at her with infinite kindness and said, "I can help you, but first you must bring me something. Go into the village and bring me a mustard seed, but this mustard seed must come from a household that has never experienced death." Hope flickered in Kisa Gautami's heart as she set off on this task. She went from door to door, explaining her mission. At each house, people were willing to give her mustard seeds. But when she asked whether their household had ever known death, the answer was always the same. One family had lost a grandmother, another had lost a father, another a child. House after house, the story repeated. As the day wore on, a profound realization began to dawn. Death was not something that had uniquely targeted her family. It was universal, touching every household, every heart. Her grief, while intensely personal and real, was also part of the vast shared experience of being human. When she returned to the Buddha, empty-handed, but with a transformed understanding, he spoke gently. "The living are few, but the dead are many. You thought that you alone had lost a child. In truth, all beings face loss. Your grief is not unique. It connects you to all of life." This story teaches us something profoundly healing about our own struggles. Us. When we are in pain, we often feel isolated, as if we are the only ones facing such difficulties. We look around and see others who seem to have easier lives, and we wonder why we have been singled out for suffering. But the truth is that every human being faces loss, disappointment, illness, and the fundamental uncertainty of existence. Your struggles do not set you apart. They connect you to the universal human experience. Every person you see has walked through their own valleys of difficulty, has faced their own moments of despair, has had to find their own way through grief and challenge. This understanding doesn't mean more pain. but it can ease the additional burden of feeling alone in it when you realize that what you're experiencing is part of the human condition rather than evidence of personal failure or cosmic unfairness. Something in your heart can soften. As you rest here in the quiet of this moment, feel into this connection with all beings who have ever sought rest after a difficult day, who have ever lain down carrying worries or sorrows, who have ever needed the healing that comes with sleep. You are part of an ancient and continuous stream of humanity, seeking peace, seeking rest, seeking the restoration that comes with letting go. This recognition of our shared humanity naturally opens our hearts to compassion, both for ourselves and for others, when we see that everyone struggles, everyone faces loss, everyone needs tenderness. Our judgments begin to soften, and our capacity for understanding grows. Let this understanding carry you deeper into rest, knowing that in seeking peace, in needing restoration, in simply being human with all its challenges and beauty, you are connected to every being who has ever lived and ever will live. You are not alone in your struggles, and you are not alone in your capacity for peace. Feel your breathing deepen as this wisdom settles into your bones. Tomorrow will bring what it brings, but for now, you can rest in the fellowship of all beings held by the same forces of nature that have cradled countless generations before you into the healing embrace of sleep. As we continue deeper into these ancient teachings, we encounter a wisdom that can transform how we meet the constantly changing circumstances of our lives. This understanding comes to us through the story of a farmer whose response to every event, whether seemingly good or bad, was simply, "Well, see." In a peaceful valley, surrounded by rolling hills, there lived an old farmer known throughout his village for his remarkable equanimity. No matter what happened, fortune or misfortune, gain or loss, he maintained the same calm demeanor. His neighbors often marveled at his unshakable peace, though they didn't always understand it. The farmer owned just one horse, essential for working his fields and carrying his harvest to market. This horse was not just his livelihood, but his companion, and the two had worked together for many years. But one morning, the farmer woke to find his stable empty. During the night, the horse had broken through the fence and disappeared into the wild countryside. When the villagers heard this news, they rushed to his home with expressions of sympathy and concern. "What terrible luck," they exclaimed. "How will you plough your fields now? How will you transport your crops? This is such a disaster for you and your family." The old farmer listened to their condolences with his characteristic calm. He nodded graciously at their concern, but his only response was, "Well, see." His neighbors were puzzled. How could he be so indifferent to such obvious misfortune? They shook their heads and returned to their homes, certain that the farmer was in denial about his loss, or perhaps too proud to show his distress. A week passed, and then something unexpected happened. The farmer's horse returned, but it didn't come back alone. Following behind were 6 beautiful wild horses, strong and magnificent creatures from the mountain valleys. Somehow, the farmer's gentle horse had attracted this small herd and led them home. Now the farmer, who had owned just one horse, suddenly possessed 7, the same neighbors who had offered sympathy the week before came running back with congratulations and excitement. "What amazing fortune," they declared. "You've gone from having one horse to having 7. You'll be the most prosperous farmer in the entire valley." What Incredible luck, again. The farmer received their enthusiasm with gracious calm, but his response remained the same. Well, see. Once more, his neighbors were bewildered. Surely this was clearly good fortune. How could he not be celebrating? They departed, whispering among themselves about their strange neighbors' inexplicable reactions. The following day brought another turn of events. The farmer's son, eager to train these spirited wild horses, decided to attempt breaking the most magnificent stallion of the group. But wild horses are not easily tamed, and in the midst of the training session, the young man was thrown violently to the ground. The fall broke his leg severely, leaving him unable to walk or help with the demanding work of the farm. The neighbors returned yet again, this time with faces full of sympathy and worry. "Oh, what misfortune has struck your family now?" they lamented. "Your son is injured just when you need his help the most. With harvest season approaching and all these horses to tend, how will you manage? This is surely a terrible stroke of bad luck." The farmer listened compassionately to their concerns, thanked them for their care, and gave the same response he had offered before. Well, see. Days passed, and then came news that changed everything once more. War had broken out with a neighboring kingdom, and the king's soldiers were marching through every village, conscripting all the young, able-bodied men to serve in what everyone knew would be a bloody and dangerous conflict. Many families watched in anguish as their sons were taken away, knowing that many would never return. When the conscription officers reached the farmer's home and saw his son with his broken leg, they passed him by. The injury that had seemed like such misfortune now meant that the young man could stay safely with his family, while others marched off to an uncertain fate. The neighbors, whose own sons had been taken for the war, came to the farmer with mixed emotions, grief for their own losses and amazement at what now appeared to be his incredible good fortune. "How blessed you are," they said through their tears. "Your son's accident, which seemed so terrible, has saved him from the war. What remarkable luck." The farmer received their words with the same gentle presence he had shown through every previous event. His response, consistent as always, was simply, "Well, see." This beautiful story teaches us about the profound limitation of our judgments. We live our lives constantly categorizing our experiences as good or bad, fortunate or unfortunate, based on our very limited perspective. But life is far more complex and interconnected than our quick assessments can grasp. What appears to be a disaster may be preparing the ground for unexpected blessings. What seems like tremendous good fortune may lead to challenges we never anticipated. The farmer's wisdom lay not in being indifferent to events, but in understanding that the full meaning of any situation continues to unfold over time, often in ways we could never foresee. This teaching invites us to hold our experiences more lightly, to resist the mind's habitual rush to judgment. When something difficult happens, instead of immediately spiraling into despair about how terrible it is, we might pause and remember, "Well, see." When something wonderful occurs, instead of clinging desperately to our good fortune, we can appreciate it while remembering that this too is part of life's ever-changing flow. As you rest here now, consider the events of your own recent days. Are there situations you've labeled as clearly good or bad? What if you could hold these circumstances with the farmer's patient wisdom, trusting that their ultimate meaning is still revealing itself? Feel how your body can relax when it's not constantly braced for judgment. when it doesn't have to defend against the bad or grasp after the good. There's a profound peace available in this not knowing, this willingness to let life unfold without demanding that it conform to our preconceptions about how things should be. This equanimity that the farmer embodied naturally leads us to another powerful teaching about how we can respond when others direct their own disturbance toward us. This wisdom comes through the story of the Buddha and an angry man who sought to disturb the Buddha's peace. One day, as the Buddha sat teaching a small group of disciples, in the shade of a great tree, a man approached with fury blazing in his eyes. He had heard about the Buddha's growing influence and felt threatened by the respect and devotion people were showing this teacher. Consumed with jealousy and resentment, he decided to confront the Buddha publicly, hoping to embarrass him in front of his followers. The man strode up to where the Buddha sat in calm meditation and began hurling insults with vicious intent. "You are nothing but a fraud," he shouted. "You pretend to be wise and enlightened, but you're just deceiving these gullible people. You think you're better than everyone else, but I see through your act." The Buddha remained completely still, his expression unchanged, neither defending himself nor responding to the man's attacks. This lack of reaction only inflamed the angry man further. He shouted even louder, his insults becoming more personal and harsh. "How can you just sit there like you're above it all? Don't you care what people think of you? I refuse to bow to a fake like you." For several minutes, the man continued his verbal assault, while the Buddha sat in perfect stillness, simply witnessing the display of rage without being disturbed by it. The disciples watched in amazement, not at the angry man's behavior, but at their teacher's unshakable equanimity. Finally, exhausted by his own fury and frustrated by the complete lack of response, the man demanded, "Why won't you say anything? Why won't you defend yourself? Don't my words affect you at all?" The Buddha looked at him with eyes full of compassion and spoke gently. "Tell me, friend, if someone offers you a gift and you decline to accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man, caught off guard by the unexpected question, thought for a moment. "Well, if I don't take it, then it would still belong to the person who offered it." "Exactly." The Buddha nodded. "And in the same way, if you offer me your anger, your insults, and your hatred, and I choose not to accept them, then to whom do they belong?" The man stood speechless as the profound simplicity of this truth settled over him. His anger had been like offering gifts that were never accepted. It remained entirely his own burden to carry. The Buddha continued with infinite gentleness, "I choose not to be disturbed by what you have offered me. I choose peace. Your anger cannot touch my inner calm unless I invite it in. You are the one who must carry the weight of these emotions, not me." Standing there, in the presence of such unshakable peace, the man felt his fury beginning to dissolve. He realized that his anger had been like grasping a hot coal with the intention of throwing it. He had been the one getting burned. This teaching reveals something revolutionary about our relationship with others' negativity. We often believe that we are victims of other people's moods, that their anger or criticism automatically determines how we feel. But the Buddha shows us that we have a choice in every moment about what we accept into our inner world. When someone offers you the gift of their irritation, their judgment, their bad mood, you don't have to accept delivery. You can let these energies remain with their sender while you maintain your own inner weather. This is not about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about recognizing that taking on others' emotional disturbances doesn't help anyone and only multiplies suffering. This principle applies not just to obvious anger, but to all the subtle ways people might try to disturb your peace. The coworker who complains constantly, the family member who always sees the negative side of things, the friend who seems to drain your energy with their worries. You can listen with compassion while refusing to absorb their disturbance into your own system. As you rest here, in the quiet of this moment, feel into your own capacity for this kind of inner sovereignty. Notice how peaceful it is to simply witness your own thoughts and feelings without being commanded by them. This same witnessing awareness can remain undisturbed by others' emotional offerings. Let your breath carry you deeper into this understanding. Each exhale can be a gentle declining of any negativity you might have absorbed today, a quiet returning to sender of any emotional gifts you chose not to keep. From this place of inner sovereignty, we naturally come to understand another profound truth about the nature of existence itself. This is beautifully illustrated in the teaching of the monk. In a mountain monastery renowned for its peaceful atmosphere, there lived a master who was deeply beloved by his students. His wisdom was matched by his serenity, and people often marveled at how nothing seemed to disturb his equanimity. One afternoon, during their regular tea ceremony, this master held up a simple, beautiful clay teacup and gazed at it thoughtfully. The teacup was exquisite in its simplicity. Smooth lines, perfect proportions, a soft earthy color that spoke of the skilled hands that had shaped it. The students, curious about their master's silent contemplation, waited to hear what insight he might share about this ordinary object. After several moments of quiet observation, the master smiled gently and spoke, "This teacup is already broken." His students looked at each other in confusion. They could see clearly that the teacup was whole, undamaged, perfectly intact. There was no crack, no chip, no sign of any imperfection. One of the younger students couldn't contain his puzzlement and spoke up. "Master, forgive me, but the teacup appears to be in perfect condition." "Why do you say it is already broken?" The master continued to hold the cup gently, his smile deepening. "In my mind," he explained, "this teacup is already broken. It may appear whole now, but one day, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps in many years, it will break. This is inevitable. Nothing made of clay lasts forever. When I truly understand that it is already broken, I can fully appreciate its beauty as it is now without clinging to it or fearing its loss." He paused, allowing his words to settle into the minds of his listeners. When we accept the impermanence of all things, we are free to love them completely without the anxiety of trying to make them last forever. We can use this cup with joy, knowing that its temporary nature doesn't diminish its value, it enhances it. The students sat in contemplative silence, beginning to grasp the profound implications of their teacher's words. He wasn't speaking only about teacups. "Everything in our lives is like this teacup," the master continued. "Our bodies, our relationships, our possessions, our very lives, all are already broken in the sense that they are temporary expressions in an ever-changing world. When we fight against this truth, we create suffering for ourselves. When we accept it, we find freedom to love fully, without the desperate need to control or preserve." One student asked, "But Master, does this mean we should not care for things since they will eventually be lost anyway?" The master's eyes sparkled with warmth, Quite the opposite. When we truly accept impermanence, we can care for things more deeply, because we're not wasting energy in futile attempts to make them permanent. We can love our parents, knowing they will not live forever, and this knowledge makes every moment with them more precious. We can enjoy our health, knowing it will change, and this awareness encourages us to appreciate the gift of feeling well. We can cherish our youth, knowing it will pass, and this understanding helps us not waste it on trivial worries. This teaching of the already broken teacup offers us one of the most liberating perspectives available to human consciousness. So much of our anxiety comes from trying to preserve what cannot be preserved, to make permanent what is inherently temporary. We suffer when our bodies begin to age because we're attached to them staying young. We anguish when relationships change because we want them to remain exactly as they were during their peak moments. We feel devastated when we lose possessions because we had convinced ourselves they were permanent parts of our identity. But what if we could see with the Master's eyes? What if we could look at our own lives and recognize that everything we cherish is already broken, not as a cause for despair, but as an invitation to love more fully? When we truly internalize the temporary nature of everything we hold dear, a remarkable freedom emerges. The pain of loss lessens because we never fully believed in permanence to begin with. The joy of presence increases because we know how precious and fleeting these moments are. The grip of attachment loosens because we understand that trying to hold water in our clenched fists only causes it to slip away faster. As your body settles deeper into rest, feel into this teaching with your whole being. Your physical form is already broken. It is aging and changing every moment, and one day it will return to the elements from which it came. This is not morbid, but miraculous. It means that right now, in this moment, you are experiencing something precious and unrepeatable. Your thoughts are already broken. They arise and pass away constantly, never staying the same for even 2 consecutive moments. This is not a problem solved, but a freedom to be celebrated. It means you are not stuck with any particular thought or mood forever. Your problems are already broken. They will change, evolve, and eventually resolve or transform into something entirely different. This perspective can bring tremendous relief to whatever challenges you may be carrying. Nothing stays the same, including your troubles. Feel how this understanding can soften your grip on everything, not with indifference, but with a deeper appreciation for the flowing, temporary, beautiful nature of existence itself. Let your breath become a teacher in impermanence, each inhale arising fresh and new, each exhale releasing and letting go. This wisdom of impermanence naturally leads us to explore the nature of true generosity and how our understanding of what is valuable can be transformed. This comes to us through a teaching story about the Buddha and a wealthy merchant's magnificent gift. During the time when the Buddha traveled throughout ancient India, sharing his teachings, word of his wisdom spread far and wide. In one prosperous trading town, a wealthy merchant heard of this enlightened teacher and felt moved to offer him a gift worthy of such a revered figure. The merchant had in his possession a robe of extraordinary beauty and value. It was woven from the finest silk, richly adorned with intricate golden threads that caught the light like captured sunbeams. The craftsmanship was unparalleled. It had taken master weavers many months to complete, and its cost could have fed a family for years. Filled with reverence and eager to make an impressive offering, the merchant sought out the Buddha. He found him sitting peacefully under a tree, surrounded by disciples, teaching in his characteristically gentle manner. The merchant approached respectfully, bowed deeply, and presented the magnificent robe. "Lord, Buddha," the merchant said with great ceremony, "I offer you this robe as a token of my deepest respect and gratitude for your teachings. Please accept this humble gift from one who wishes to honor your wisdom." The Buddha looked at the exquisite garment with appreciation, clearly recognizing both its beauty and the sincere intention behind the offering. But then he smiled gently and shook his head. "Thank you for your generous heart and your kind gesture," he said. "However, I cannot accept this gift. Such luxury is not appropriate for a simple monk like me. I am content with the modest robes I already wear." The merchant was taken aback. He had never had such a valuable gift refused before. "But Lord Buddha," he protested, "surely you deserve the finest things I can offer. This robe represents my highest respect for you." The Buddha's eyes sparkled with compassionate understanding. "If you truly wish to honor me," he replied, "there is another way to use this beautiful gift. Take this robe and offer it to someone who has genuine need, perhaps someone who is cold and has nothing adequate to keep them warm. That act would bring far greater merit than giving luxury to one who already has enough." The merchant paused, considering these unexpected words. He had been thinking about generosity in terms of giving expensive things to important people, but the Buddha was pointing towards something entirely different. "You see," the Buddha continued gently, "true generosity is not about the monetary value of what we give, nor is it about impressing the recipient. It is about meeting genuine need with an open heart. The most precious gifts are often the simplest ones offered to those who have been forgotten by the world." Moved by this wisdom, the merchant bowed again and took the robe. He spent that evening walking through the poorer sections of the town until he found an elderly man shivering in threadbare clothing. The merchant approached him quietly and offered the magnificent robe. The old man's eyes filled with tears of gratitude as he wrapped the beautiful garment around his shoulders. For the first time in years, he would sleep warm. The merchant realized that he had never experienced such joy from giving, not when he had donated to temples for recognition, not when he had given gifts to win favor, but here, in this simple act of meeting genuine need. When the merchant returned to the Buddha the next day to tell of his experience, the Buddha nodded with quiet approval. "Now you understand," he said. "The value of a gift is not determined by its cost, but by how much love and awareness goes into the giving, and how deeply it serves the well-being of another." Teaching transforms our understanding of generosity from something we do to gain merit or recognition into something that flows naturally from a compassionate heart. True giving is not about the size of the gift, but about the purity of the intention behind it. We live in a culture that often measures generosity by dollar amounts, that applauds large donations while overlooking the widow's mite. But the Buddha's teaching reminds us that the most powerful giving often happens in quiet moments. The full attention we offer to someone who needs to be heard, the patience we extend to someone who is struggling, the kindness we show to someone's society has deemed unimportant. The practice of true generosity also teaches us about the nature of wealth itself. The merchant discovered that real abundance is not found in accumulating possessions, but in the capacity to share what we have with those who need it. When we give from genuine care, rather than from ego or expectation, we tap into an inexhaustible source of fulfillment. This understanding can transform even the smallest interactions in our daily lives. The smile we offer to a stressed cashier, the door we hold for someone whose hands are full, the listening ear we provide to a friend in distress. These simple acts of generosity can be as valuable as the merchant's silk robe when they come from a truly open heart. As you rest in the quiet of this moment, feel into your own capacity for this kind of giving. Tomorrow will bring countless opportunities to practice generosity, not necessarily with money or material goods, but with your presence, your patience, your kindness. Each offering, however small, is a way of participating in the great web of care that connects all beings. Let your breathing carry you deeper into this understanding of interconnectedness. Each breath you take has been a gift from the plants that created the oxygen. Each breath you release becomes a gift to those same plants. Even in the simple act of breathing, you are engaged in a constant exchange of giving and receiving with the world around you. This natural flow of generosity leads us to explore another profound teaching about the burdens we carry unnecessarily in our minds long after they have served their purpose. This wisdom comes to us through the story of two traveling monks who encounter a situation that tests their understanding of truly letting go. Two monks, one elderly and experienced, the other young and still learning, were traveling together on foot along a muddy country road after heavy rains. They walked in companionable silence, each step a practice of mindfulness, each breath an opportunity for presence. As they approached a river crossing, they encountered a young woman dressed in fine clothing, standing at the water's edge. She was clearly distressed, afraid to cross the swollen stream, because the water would ruin her beautiful garments. And the current seemed treacherous for someone inexperienced in such crossings. When she saw the two monks approaching, she called out, hopefully, kind sirs, "I must reach the other side to attend to urgent family business, but I fear this crossing. Might you be able to help me?" Without hesitation, the elder monk walked over to the woman, gently lifted her in his arms, and carried her safely across the rushing water. He set her down carefully on the far bank, where she thanked him with a grateful bow before hurrying on her way. The two monks continued their journey in what appeared to be comfortable silence. But as the hours passed, the younger monk's face grew increasingly troubled. His brow was furrowed, his jaw tight, and he kept glancing at his companion with a mixture of confusion and disapproval. Several miles down the road, the young monk could no longer contain himself. "Elder brother," he burst out, "we have taken sacred vows as monks. We are not supposed to touch women, especially young and beautiful women. How could you pick up that woman and carry her across the river? Have you forgotten our vows? How can you be so careless with the precepts that guide our lives?" The older monk looked at his agitated companion with gentle eyes and replied calmly, "My dear friend, I set that woman down at the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" In that moment, the younger monk realized the profound truth of his teacher's words. While the elder monk had physically carried the woman for perhaps 2 minutes across the water and then completely let go of the encounter, the younger monk had been mentally carrying her for hours, growing increasingly burdened by his judgments and concerns. This simple story illuminates one of the most common ways we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves. We carry situations, conversations, and concerns long after they have ended, replaying them in our minds, analyzing them, worrying about them, sometimes for days or weeks or even years after the actual event has concluded. The elder monk understood something profound about the nature of appropriate action and complete release. When the situation called for compassion, he responded with compassion. When the situation was complete, he released it completely. He demonstrated what it means to be fully present to what is needed in each moment without carrying the residue of that action forward. The younger monk, caught up in rigid thinking about rules and appearances, missed the forest for the trees. His attachment to a particular interpretation of his vows prevented him from seeing the compassionate wisdom of his teacher's action. More significantly, his inability to let go of his judgment turned a moment of witnessing kindness into hours of mental suffering. How often do we do this same thing? We have a difficult conversation with someone and then replay it endlessly in our minds, crafting better responses, nurturing our resentment, or worrying about the implications. We make a mistake at work and carry the shame and anxiety home with us, letting it disturb our evening and our sleep. We receive criticism and turn it over and over in our minds like a stone in our shoe, unable to simply hear it, learn what we can from it, and move on. The teaching of the two monks invites us to examine what we might be carrying unnecessarily. What situations from today, this week, this month, or even years ago are we still mentally lugging around like the younger monk carried that woman? What conversations are we still having in our minds with people who have long since forgotten the original exchange? The practice this story offers is both simple and revolutionary. When something is done, let it be done. When a conversation is over, let it be over. When a mistake has been made, and whatever amends are possible have been offered, let the mistake be in the past where it belongs. This doesn't mean we don't learn from our experiences or that we become indifferent to the consequences of our actions. It means we don't torture ourselves by mentally reliving situations that have already concluded. We extract whatever wisdom is available and then set down the burden. As you lie here in the gentle darkness, feel into what you might be carrying that could be set down. Are there conversations from today that you're still mentally engaged in? Worries is about tomorrow that are stealing the peace of this moment. Old hurts or regrets that you've been carrying so long. They feel like permanent residents of your mind. Imagine placing each of these burdens gently on the ground beside your bed. They will still be there tomorrow if you truly need to pick them up again. But for now, for these precious hours of rest, you can travel light. Feel the relief in your shoulders, the softening in your face, the deeper ease in your breathing. As you practice the elder monk's wisdom of complete release, let each exhale be a setting down, each inhale a return to the simple presence of this moment. You are not your thoughts about what happened earlier. You are not your worries about what might happen tomorrow. You are the aware, peaceful presence that can witness all of these mental movements without being captured by any of them. This capacity to set down what we have been carrying unnecessarily is one of the most practical and immediately helpful skills we can develop. It transforms us from people who are constantly burdened by the past and anxious about the future into people who can meet each moment with fresh availability and presence. Rest in this understanding as your body continues to release the day's tensions and your mind settles into the natural peace that emerges when we stop disturbing it with unnecessary burdens. Like the elder monk, you can respond to each situation with appropriate care and then move forward unencumbered, free to meet whatever comes next with wisdom and compassion. As we journey deeper into the night and deeper into these ancient teachings, we come to understand that true peace emerges not from the absence of sound, but from the quality of our listening. This profound insight comes to us through the story of a small cricket living in a magnificent temple and the lesson it teaches about the nature of inner silence. In the heart of a bustling city stood a temple of extraordinary beauty, its golden roof catching the light of sun and moon, its walls having sheltered seekers for centuries. Despite being surrounded by the constant noise of modern life, traffic rushing past, construction work, crowds of visitors, within its sacred walls, there existed a profound sense of peace that touched everyone who entered. One day, a young musician visited this temple. Having studied both music and meditation, he was deeply curious about the quality of silence that seemed to permeate this holy space. He had visited many quiet places before, but there was something different here, something that went beyond mere absence of noise. As he sat in meditation, in a corner of the main hall, he closed his eyes and began to listen deeply. Beneath the occasional footsteps of other visitors and the distant sounds of the city, he detected something remarkable, a subtle rhythmic sound, so faint it was almost imperceptible. Intrigued, he followed this delicate sound to its source and discovered a tiny cricket living in a crack in one of the ancient wooden pillars. The musician was amazed. How could such a small creature be heard in this vast space filled with the ambient noise of a busy city? He approached an elderly monk who was quietly tending to the temple and asked, "Venerable one, I've discovered a cricket living in that pillar. How is it that such a tiny sound can be heard amid all the other noise?" The old monk smiled with the warmth of deep understanding. "Ah, you have heard our small friend. That cricket has lived in this temple for many seasons, singing both day and night. But you are one of the few visitors who has ever noticed it." "But how is that possible?" the musician asked. "Surely such a persistent sound would be obvious to everyone." The monk gestured for the young man to follow him to the temple entrance. From within his robes, he withdrew a single coin and without warning dropped it onto the stone floor. The metallic ring echoed through the hall, and immediately nearly every person in the temple turned their head toward the sound. The monk looked at the puzzled musician with gentle eyes. The coin makes no more noise than the cricket, yet everyone noticed it immediately. People hear what they are listening for. Their ears are trained to recognize the sound of money, the sound of opportunity, the sound of things they believe will benefit them. But they walk right past the cricket song because they have not learned to value such voices. He paused, allowing this truth to settle into the young man's understanding. Those who cultivate inner stillness can hear what others miss. Not just crickets, but the whispers of wisdom that speak constantly beneath the noise of everyday thinking. True silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of awareness that can discern the subtle from the obvious, the meaningful from the merely loud. This teaching reveals something profound about the nature of attention and the quality of mind that leads to genuine peace. We live in a world that trains us to respond to the loudest, most insistent voices, the urgent demands, the dramatic events, the things that clamor for our immediate attention. But often, the most valuable guidance comes through quieter channels in our inner world. This same principle applies. The anxious thoughts, the compelling worries, the dramatic internal voices tend to capture our attention completely. But beneath this mental noise, there is always a deeper wisdom available. The quiet, knowing that understands what truly matters, the gentle voice of intuition, the subtle guidance of our deepest values. The practice of inner listening is like training our ears to hear the cricket in the temple. It requires us to become less reactive to the obvious and more receptive to the subtle. This doesn't mean ignoring practical responsibilities or urgent needs, but rather developing the capacity to discern between what is truly important and what is merely loud. As you rest here in the gathering quiet of sleep, notice what you can hear when you listen beneath the surface of your thinking. Perhaps there are sensations in your body that you usually overlook in the busyness of the day. Maybe there are feelings of gratitude or peace that have been present, but overshadowed by more demanding emotions. Could there be an inner wisdom that has been trying to speak to you in a voice quieter than your worries? This quality of deep listening naturally opens us to another fundamental teaching about the nature of learning and growth. Sometimes our very expertise, our accumulated knowledge, can become a barrier to fresh understanding. This insight comes to us through the story of a learned professor and his encounter with a Zen master's cup of tea, a university professor, renowned for his scholarly knowledge of philosophy and religion, once journeyed to visit a famous Zen master. This professor had spent decades studying various spiritual traditions, had written numerous academic papers, and considered himself quite knowledgeable about Zen in particular. He was eager to engage this master in deep philosophical discussion, and perhaps even to share some of his own insights. When he arrived at the master's simple dwelling, he was greeted warmly and invited to sit. The old master suggested they begin with tea, and the professor nodded politely, though he was more interested in getting to the serious intellectual discourse he had come for. As the master prepared the tea with slow, deliberate movements, the professor began to expound upon his understanding of Zen. He quoted various texts, analyzed different schools of thought, compared Zen to other philosophical traditions, and demonstrated his extensive knowledge. He spoke at length about emptiness and form, about sudden and gradual enlightenment, about the various meditation techniques he had studied. The master listened in patient silence, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, simply attending to the preparation of the tea. When the water was ready, he placed a cup before the professor and began to pour. The cup filled to the brim, but the master continued pouring. Tea spilled over the rim across the low table and began to soak into the professor's clothing. "Stop!" the professor exclaimed, jumping back. "Can't you see? The cup is already full. No more will go in." The master ceased pouring and looked at the professor with eyes that held both kindness and infinite patience. "Like this cup," he said gently, "you are full of your own opinions and knowledge. How can I show you anything new unless you first empty your cup?" In that moment, the professor realized that his extensive learning had become a prison of preconceptions. Every new piece of information was being filtered through what he already knew, preventing him from experiencing the fresh, direct understanding that the master might have offered. His cup was so full of second-hand knowledge that there was no room for immediate lived wisdom. This teaching about the empty cup reveals something crucial about the nature of genuine learning and spiritual growth. Often the more we think we know about something, the less we are able to truly experience it. Our concepts about meditation, about peace, about spirituality can become substitutes for the direct experience of these realities. The beginner's mind, what Zen calls don't know mind, is actually a profound form of wisdom. When we approach any situation with genuine openness, without immediately, according to our previous experience, we create space for authentic discovery. The expert's mind, filled with conclusions and comparisons, often misses the subtle uniqueness of each moment. This applies not just to spiritual matters, but to all aspects of life. How often do we approach a conversation with someone we know well, already knowing what they will say? How frequently do we encounter a familiar situation and miss its fresh possibility because we're so certain we understand it completely? The practice of emptying our cup is an ongoing discipline. It means consciously setting aside our assumptions, our quick judgments, our need to categorize and control through understanding. It means approaching each moment, each person, each experience with the curiosity and openness of someone encountering it for the first time. As you settle deeper into this space of rest, notice what it feels like to empty your cup of the day's accumulations, the conclusions you reached, the judgments you made, the certainties you collected. What remains when you set all of this aside? What quality of awareness is present when you're not busy knowing anything at all? This emptiness is not vacant or lifeless. It is spacious and alive with possibility, like the silence that holds all potential sounds, like the blank canvas that can receive any painting. From this empty receptive state, genuine understanding can emerge naturally, without forcing or grasping. This understanding of emptiness and receptivity leads us to explore another profound teaching about the nature of true mastery and the power of undivided attention. This wisdom comes to us through the story of a master archer whose skill transcended mere technique. In ancient times, there lived an archer whose reputation had spread throughout the land. His arrows never missed their mark, and his ability seemed to border on the miraculous. Students came from far and wide, hoping to learn the secret of his extraordinary skill. The emperor himself had honored this archer, and his name was spoken with reverence in every corner of the kingdom. One day, a young archer who had achieved considerable skill in his own right approached the master. He had practiced diligently for years. His technique was flawless, and he could hit targets that others considered impossible. Yet he sensed that there was something more, some deeper level of mastery that remained beyond his reach. "Master," the young man said, bowing deeply, "I have trained with dedication and achieved what many consider great skill. But I know there is something I am missing. Please share with me the secret that makes your arrows fly so true." The master looked at the eager student thoughtfully. "Meet me at dawn tomorrow on the mountain cliff," he said. "Bring your bow and arrows." The next morning, the student arrived at the appointed place to find the master waiting at the edge of a precipice. Below them, the ground fell away hundreds of feet to a rocky valley. The master positioned himself at the very edge of this cliff, where one wrong step would mean certain death. Standing in this precarious position with the vast drop behind him, the master drew his bow and sent an arrow flying toward a distant target. His form was perfect, his aim true, his stance completely stable, despite the dangerous location. Then he turned to the student and said, "Now you shoot from here." The young archer approached the edge and immediately felt his confidence evaporate. Looking down at the dizzying drop, his heart began to race and his hands began to tremble. The fear of falling made it impossible for him to focus on his target. After several failed attempts, he stepped back from the edge, his face pale with anxiety. "I cannot shoot from there, Master," he admitted. "The height makes me dizzy and fear disrupts my concentration. How can I hit a target when I am afraid for my life?" The master nodded with understanding. "Now you see the difference between us. It is not in our technique or our strength. When I shoot, there is only the arrow, the bow, and the target. There is no fear of falling, no thought of success or failure, no awareness of being watched or judged. There is not even a separate eye who is shooting. There is only the perfect unity of the entire action." He continued gently. "You miss your mark, not because your skill is inadequate, but because you are divided against yourself. Part of you shoots the arrow, while another part fears the cliff, hopes for success, worries about failure, and remains self-conscious about your performance. When you can engage completely with your whole being undivided by fear or desire, you will discover the mastery you seek." This teaching reveals something profound about the nature of excellence in any field. True mastery is not about accumulating techniques or building up the ego's sense of achievement. It is about the capacity for complete presence, for total absorption in the task at hand, without the interference of self-consciousness or inner division. We can see this same quality in great musicians who become one with their instruments, in athletes who enter what they call the zone, in craftspeople who lose themselves completely in their work. In these moments, the usual sense of a separate self, trying to control outcomes, dissolves, and action flows naturally from a deeper source. The young archer's problem was not lack of skill, but excess of self. His technique was excellent, but his mind was divided between shooting the arrow and protecting his image, between focusing on the target and managing his fears. This inner fragmentation scattered his energy and disrupted his natural ability. Most of us live with this same kind of inner division much of the time. We approach our work while worrying about how others will judge our performance. We engage in conversations, simultaneously planning what we will say next. We eat our meals while thinking about other things entirely. We go through our days with our attention scattered across multiple concerns, rarely bringing our full presence to any single activity. The practice the Archer story points toward is the cultivation of what Zen calls on-pointed mind, the capacity to gather all of our scattered energy into complete engagement with whatever we are doing. This is not a tense, effortful concentration, but a natural settling into wholeness, like water finding its own level. As you rest here now, you have an opportunity to practice this same quality of undivided attention. Instead of trying to do anything or achieve any particular state, you can simply practice being completely present to the experience of lying here. Feel the weight of your body, the rhythm of your breathing, the temperature of the air against your skin. When your mind wanders to tomorrow's responsibilities or today's concerns, you can practice the archer's skill, gently gathering your scattered attention back to this moment, this breath, this simple experience of being here now. Each time you do this, you strengthen your capacity for the kind of presence that leads to true mastery in any field. Notice how peaceful it becomes when you stop trying to be somewhere else, when you stop dividing your attention between being here and thinking about there. This is the undivided awareness that the master archer embodied, completely present, naturally skillful, free from the anxiety that comes with self-consciousness. This understanding of presence and wholeness leads us naturally to another profound insight about our true nature. Often we approach spiritual practice with the assumption that we need to create or achieve something that is currently missing. But there is a beautiful teaching that suggests the opposite, that our essential nature is already complete and luminous, and our work is simply to uncover what has always been present. This insight comes to us through the story of a young monk who was struggling with his meditation practice. Despite years of sincere effort, he felt that enlightenment remained as distant as ever. His teacher, recognizing the young man's frustration, decided to offer a different kind of instruction. One day, the teacher led his student to a forgotten corner of the monastery, where an ancient mirror sat covered in dust and grime. The mirror had once been beautiful and perfectly reflective, but decades of neglect had left its surface completely obscured. "Do you see this mirror?" the teacher asked. "Yes, master," the student replied, puzzled by what seemed like an irrelevant question. "Was this mirror created by the dust that covers it?" the teacher inquired gently. The student frowned. "No, of course not. The mirror exists independent of the dust. The dust merely covers what is already there. And if someone wished to see their reflection clearly in this mirror, what would they need to do? They would need to clean it," the student answered, beginning to sense where this conversation was leading. They would need to remove the dust and polish the surface. The teacher handed him a soft cloth. "Please clean this mirror." Day after day, the monk worked patiently on this task. The accumulated grime of decades didn't yield easily. He tried different methods, gentle cleaning solutions, fine oils, careful polishing. Gradually, painstakingly, the mirror's true surface began to emerge. After many weeks of dedicated work, the mirror was completely restored, its surface brilliantly clear and perfectly reflective. When the work was complete, the teacher came to examine the result. Looking at the beautifully polished mirror, he asked, "Did your efforts create the mirror's capacity to reflect?" "No, master," the monk replied, with growing understanding. "The mirror always possessed the ability to reflect perfectly. My cleaning simply removed what was obscuring this natural quality." "Exactly," the teacher smiled, "and so it is with your Buddha nature. Enlightenment is not something you must achieve or create through your practice. Your essential nature, clear, luminous, naturally wise and compassionate, has been present from the very beginning. Your meditation, your ethical conduct, your study, these are like the cloth you use to polish the mirror. They don't create your awakened nature. They reveal what has always been your original face." This teaching completely transforms our relationship with spiritual practice and personal growth. Instead of approaching meditation or self-development as though we were broken things that needed fixing, we can understand that we are already whole beings, learning to remove the obscurations that hide our inherent completeness. The dust on the mirror represents all the conditioned patterns that cover our natural clarity, the habits of self-criticism, the stories of unworthiness, the identification with temporary emotions and circumstances. These patterns are real, and they do obscure our deeper nature, but they are not fundamental to who we are. They are more like weather patterns passing through the sky of our awareness. Our true nature, what Buddhism calls Buddha nature, is like the sky itself, vast, clear, untroubled by whatever weather systems move through it. Clouds may temporarily block our view of the blue sky, but they never actually stain or damage the sky itself. Similarly, Our difficult emotions, our confused thoughts, our personal struggles may temporarily obscure our essential clarity, but they cannot touch or corrupt our fundamental wholeness. This understanding is profoundly healing and deeply encouraging. It means that beneath whatever difficulties you may be experiencing, beneath whatever self-doubt or confusion or pain you might be carrying, your deepest nature remains unmarked and pristine. The peace you seek, the love you long for, the wisdom you hope to develop. These qualities are not foreign additions to your personality, but expressions of who you have always been at the deepest level. The practice then becomes not one of acquiring something new, but of patient, gentle removal of what obscures what is already perfect. Each moment of mindfulness, each act of kindness, each choice to respond with wisdom, rather than reactivity, is like one gentle stroke of the polishing cloth, gradually revealing the mirror's natural capacity to reflect clearly. As your breathing deepens and your body settles into greater stillness, feel into this understanding of your own inherent wholeness. You don't have to become a different person to find peace. You don't have to solve all your problems or overcome all your limitations to access the quiet joy of your essential nature. Right now, in this moment, the awareness that is reading these words, the consciousness that can observe your own thoughts and feelings, the very capacity for experience itself, this is a direct manifestation of your Buddha nature. It is not something you will achieve someday if you practice hard enough. It is what you are right now, beneath all the stories and complications. Let this recognition settle into your bones like warm sunlight. You are not a problem to be solved or a project to be improved. You are a mystery to be explored, a miracle to be appreciated, a clarity temporarily playing at being confused, a peace temporarily pretending to be anxious, a love temporarily wearing the mask of separation. This understanding naturally leads us to examine how we can avoid getting trapped in concepts and ideas about truth rather than experiencing truth directly. This insight comes to us through a simple but profound teaching about a finger pointing at the moon. Picture a clear evening when a master and student are walking together in a monastery garden. The full moon hangs luminously in the night sky, casting silver light across the paths and creating intricate patterns of shadow among the trees. The student has been struggling with the complexity of Buddhist teachings. Some texts seem to emphasize rigorous practice, while others speak of sudden enlightenment. Some focus on compassion, while others stress wisdom. And the young man finds himself confused by what appear to be contradictory approaches. As they walk, the student begins to voice his confusion. Master, I have been studying the teachings diligently, but the more I read, the more perplexed I become. One text contradicts another. How can I understand which teaching is correct? How can I know which path to follow when different masters seem to point in different directions? Without breaking stride, the master suddenly stops and points directly at the full moon hanging in the darkness above them. Look, he says, simply. The student looks up at the moon, its perfect circle glowing against the star-filled sky. Tell me, the master asks, are you looking at my finger or at the moon? At the moon, of course, the student replies, somewhat puzzled by what seems like an obvious question. And did you need to analyze my finger, compare it to other fingers, or study its technique in order to see what it was pointing toward? No, the student answers. Your finger simply directed my attention to the moon. The master nods and continues walking. the teachings, the practices, the various methods and approaches. These are all fingers pointing at the same moon. They are not the moon itself. If you spend all your time studying the fingers, analyzing their differences, debating their relative merits, you may entirely miss what they are pointing toward. As they walk further, the master adds gently, the moon of truth is not divided into competing schools or contradictory approaches. The moon simply shines with its own light, complete and unified. The apparent differences in teachings arise because different people need different kinds of guidance. Just as someone standing in the east might point west toward the moon, while someone standing in the west might point east. The directions seem opposite, but they point toward the same luminous reality. This teaching illuminates one of the most common traps on any spiritual path. Mistaking the map for the territory, confusing the menu with the meal, getting so caught up in ideas about truth that we miss the direct experience of truth itself. All wisdom traditions, all practices, all teachings are ultimately fingers pointing toward the direct experience of peace, clarity, and compassion. When they serve this function, they are invaluable guides. But when we become attached to the teachings themselves, when we start collecting spiritual concepts like trophies or using our knowledge to build a sense of spiritual identity, then the very tools meant to liberate us can become new forms of bondage. This applies even to the teachings we've been exploring tonight. These stories and insights are fingers pointing toward your own capacity for presence, peace, and wisdom. They are invitations to direct experience, not substitutes for that experience. The goal is not to remember all these teachings or to become someone who knows about Buddhism, but to taste for yourself the peace and clarity that these teachings point toward. In your daily life, you might notice this same pattern in many areas. We can become so busy reading about meditation that we forget to actually meditate. We can get so caught up in learning techniques for better relationships that we miss opportunities for simple, authentic connection with the people right in front of us. We can study stress reduction methods while remaining stressed about our progress in stress reduction. The invitation is always to use concepts, teachings, and techniques as bridges to direct experience, and then to let the concepts go. Like the raft that carries us across the river, teachings are meant to be used and then released, not carried on our backs after they have served their purpose. As you rest here in the immediacy of this moment, you are practicing the art of looking at the moon rather than analyzing the finger. This breath, this sense of peace settling into your body, this gradual release of the day's accumulated tensions. This is direct experience. This is what all the teachings point toward, but can never capture in words. Feel how simple it is to just be here without needing to understand or categorize or remember anything at all. The peace you're touching now is not the result of correctly understanding concepts about peace. It is the direct expression of your own naturally peaceful essence, temporarily freed from the complications that usually obscure it. This is the moon that every teaching points toward. Not an idea about peace, but the living reality of peace itself. Not a concept about presence, but the actual experience of being fully here. Not a theory about your Buddha nature, but the direct taste of the clarity and wholeness that you are. As our journey through these timeless teachings continues, we encounter a profound insight about how our mental states create our experienced reality. This wisdom comes to us through the powerful story of a samurai warrior who sought to understand the nature of heaven and hell, only to discover that both exist not as distant realms, but as immediate experiences created by our own minds. There once lived a samurai, renowned throughout the land for his exceptional skill with the sword and his unwavering dedication to the warrior's code of honor. After years of service to his lord, fighting countless battles and earning great respect, he began to be troubled by deeper questions about existence itself. What lay beyond this life of conflict and duty? What was the ultimate meaning of his path as a warrior? Having heard of a wise Zen master who lived in a remote mountain temple, the samurai decided to seek answers to these profound questions. After many days of difficult travel through mountain passes and forest paths, he finally arrived at the simple temple gate. The master who greeted him was an elderly monk of small stature and humble appearance, quite different from the impressive teachers the samurai had imagined. But the warrior had come too far to be deterred by appearances. He bowed respectfully and introduced himself, recounting his many accomplishments, his years of loyal service, and his reputation as one of the finest swordsmen in the land. "Master," he said with formal courtesy, "I have journeyed far to ask you about heaven and hell. I have heard of your great wisdom, and I seek to understand these realms that await us after death." The Zen master looked up at this impressive warrior, taking in his fine armor, his perfectly maintained weapons, his bearing of pride and achievement. Then, to the samurai's complete shock, the old monk burst into mocking laughter. "You," the master said with apparent disdain, "you call yourself a samurai. Look at you. Nothing but a posturing fool dressed up in costume. What lord would want such a ridiculous figure as his protector? You'd be better off running home to whatever backwater village you came from. Instead of wasting my time with your childish questions." The samurai's face flushed red with rage. Never in his life had anyone spoken to him with such disrespect. His hand moved instinctively to his sword, and in one fluid motion he drew the blade and raised it above his head, ready to strike down this insolent monk who had insulted his honor so grievously. At that precise moment, with the razor-sharp steel poised to fall, the master looked calmly into the warrior's blazing eyes and said softly, "That is the gate of hell." The samurai froze. In a flash of profound recognition, he understood what had just transpired. The master had deliberately provoked his rage to show him something crucial: how quickly pride, anger could arise in his mind, instantly creating a hellish state of consciousness. His fury had transformed him from a seeker of wisdom into a potential murderer in the span of mere seconds. Humbled by this realization, the samurai slowly lowered his sword and returned it to its sheath. He bowed deeply to the master, not with the formal courtesy he had shown before, but with genuine gratitude for this shocking and illuminating teaching. As he straightened from his bow, his heart filled with understanding, and his mind clear of rage, the master looked at him with eyes now full of warmth and compassion. "And that," the old monk said gently, "is the gate of paradise." This powerful teaching reveals something fundamental about the nature of our experience reality. Heaven and hell are not distant destinations we travel to after death, but immediate states of consciousness we create through our reactions to present circumstances. In a single moment, through the quality of our response, we can transform our experience from hellish suffering to peaceful clarity. The samurai's hell was not created by external circumstances, but by his internal reaction to those circumstances. The master's words, however insulting, were just sounds in the air. It was the warrior's identification with his pride, his attachment to his reputation, his inability to see beyond his conditioned responses, that created the flames of rage that consumed his peace. But equally important is the recognition that paradise too was immediately available. When the samurai recognized what had happened, when he chose understanding over vengeance, when he responded with humility rather than violence, the hellish state dissolved and was replaced by something entirely different. Not just the absence of anger, but the presence of genuine wisdom and gratitude. This teaching has profound implications for how we navigate our daily lives. How often do we create our own hell realms through our reactions to challenging situations, the difficult conversation with a family member that we replay endlessly in our minds, building resentment with each mental rehearsal, the criticism from a colleague that we take so personally that it ruins not just our day, but our sleep, the minor inconvenience that we inflate into a major catastrophe through our resistance and irritation. Each of these responses is a choice to walk through the gate of hell, not because the external circumstances are inherently hellish, but because our mental reaction creates a hellish inner experience. We become consumed by anger, lost in self-pity, trapped in cycles of blame and resentment that serve no constructive purpose whatsoever. But the teaching of the samurai shows us that the gate of paradise is equally available in every moment. When we can step back from our automatic reactions, when we can see our patterns of response with some clarity, when we can choose wisdom over reactivity, we immediately enter a different realm of experience. As you rest here in the quiet of this evening, feel into your own capacity for this kind of transformation. Notice how your inner experience shifts when you release resistance to whatever discomfort might be present in your body, when you stop fighting with thoughts that arise in your mind, when you choose acceptance over struggle. This is your own gate of paradise, not a reward for being good, but the natural state that emerges when you stop creating hellish reactions. This understanding of our power to create heaven or hell through our responses naturally leads us to explore another profound teaching about finding solutions by questioning our fundamental assumptions. This insight comes to us through the story of a village faced with an immovable obstacle and a Zen master who helped them see their situation from an entirely new perspective. In a small mountain village, the main road that connected the community to the outside world became blocked by an enormous boulder that had fallen from the cliffs above during a fierce. This stone was so massive and deeply embedded that despite the villagers' best efforts, they could not move it even slightly. The strongest men in the village had worked together, pushing and pulling with ropes and levers, but the boulder remained immovable. Others had tried to break it apart with hammers and chisels, but the stone was incredibly hard, and their tools made barely a scratch. Some had attempted to dig around it, hoping to roll it aside, but the ground was rocky, and the stone extended deep into the earth. After weeks of failed efforts, the villagers were growing desperate. The blocked road made it difficult to transport goods to market, to receive supplies from neighboring towns, and to travel for important business. The obstacle was affecting the entire community's livelihood and well-being. Finally, they decided to seek help from a renowned Zen master who lived in a nearby monastery. When they explained their predicament, describing all their unsuccessful attempts to move the stone, the master agreed to come and examine the situation. A large crowd gathered as the elderly master slowly walked around the enormous boulder, studying it from every angle with careful attention. The villagers waited eagerly for his solution. Perhaps he knew some technique they hadn't tried, or could organize their efforts more effectively. After his thorough examination, the master turned to the assembled crowd with a gentle smile. "Why?" he asked. Simply, "Must the stone be moved?" The villagers looked at each other in confusion. "Because it blocks our road," they replied. "It prevents us from traveling and conducting our business." The master nodded thoughtfully. "The stone blocks one path," he acknowledged, "but perhaps it creates another." Instead of removing the immovable obstacle, the master guided the villagers in creating a new path that curved gracefully around the boulder. With many hands working together on this different solution, they quickly cleared brush, smoothed the ground, and laid stones to create a route that was actually more beautiful than the original straight road. As the work progressed, something wonderful began to happen. The massive boulder, which had seemed like such a terrible problem, became a distinctive landmark that gave their village character and identity. Children began to play on it and around it. Travelers would stop to rest in its shade. Elders found it a perfect place to sit and watch the sunset. Before long, the villagers realized that what they had initially seen as a disaster had become one of their community's most beloved features. The new curved road was more pleasant to walk than the old straight path, winding gently through a grove of trees they had never fully appreciated before. When the master prepared to leave, having witnessed this transformation, he offered a final piece of wisdom. Some obstacles cannot be removed, and trying to remove them only wastes energy and creates frustration. True wisdom lies in finding ways to work with what cannot be changed, allowing apparent barriers to become gateways to unexpected solutions. This teaching reveals something crucial about our approach to problems and challenges. We often become so fixated on removing obstacles that we fail to see alternative possibilities that might be even better than our original plan. Our attachment to one particular solution can blind us to creative approaches that work with reality as it is, rather than demanding that reality conform to our expectations. The villagers' initial response was completely understandable. They wanted their road back exactly as it had been, but their stubborn focus on this one solution prevented them from seeing other options that were not only possible, but ultimately superior. Sometimes what appears to be an insurmountable problem is actually life pointing us toward a better path we would never have discovered otherwise. This principle applies to many areas of our lives. The job we lose that seemed devastating might open the door to work that's far more fulfilling. The relationship that ends painfully might create space for deeper connections we couldn't have imagined. The health challenge that forces us to slow down might teach us about rest and priorities we had been ignoring for years. The practice this teaching offers is learning to work with the unmovable boulders in our own lives, rather than exhausting ourselves trying to force them out of the way. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on positive change, but rather developing the flexibility to find creative solutions when our preferred approach isn't working. As you settle deeper into the embrace of rest Consider what boulders you might be trying to move through force rather than wisdom. Are there situations in your life where you've been pushing against immovable obstacles when a path around them might lead somewhere even better? Feel how your body relaxes when you stop struggling against what cannot be changed and instead open to possibilities you hadn't previously considered. This teaching about working creatively with obstacles naturally flows into another profound insight about the true nature of wealth and contentment. This wisdom comes to us through the beautiful story of a monk named Ryoan, who discovered that the greatest treasures are those that cannot be stolen. Ryoan was a Zen monk who had chosen to live with extraordinary simplicity in a small hut on a mountainside. He possessed almost nothing by conventional standards: a few simple robes, a bowl for eating, a mat for sleeping, and little else. Yet those who met him were struck by the deep contentment that radiated from his presence, a joy that seemed to come from an inexhaustible inner source. One night, a thief broke into Ryoan's humble dwelling, hoping to find valuables he could steal. But as he searched through the monk's few possessions by moonlight, he found nothing of monetary worth, just worn clothing, simple utensils, and basic necessities. Ryoan, who had been meditating quietly in the corner, was aware of the intruder's presence, but felt no alarm or anger. Instead, his heart was moved by compassion for someone driven to steal by whatever desperation or need. When the thief had finished his fruitless search, Ryoan spoke gently into the darkness. "Friend," he said softly, "you have traveled far to visit me tonight, and I regret that you are leaving empty-handed. Please take my robe as a gift so that your journey will not have been entirely wasted." The thief was startled by this unexpected response. He had prepared for anger, resistance, perhaps even violence, but not for kindness. Confused, but taking advantage of the offer, he grabbed the monk's outer robe and fled quickly into the night. Ryoan sat naked in his hut, watching through his small window as the thief disappeared down the mountain path under the light of the full moon. The moon hung brilliant and serene in the clear sky, casting silver light across the entire landscape, illuminating the forests and valleys with ethereal beauty. Looking up at this magnificent sight, Ryoan sighed with genuine regret and spoke aloud to himself. "Poor fellow, I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." This simple story contains layers of profound wisdom about the nature of true wealth and genuine security. The thief came seeking treasure and left with only a worn piece of cloth, never realizing that he had been in the presence of someone who possessed riches beyond measure, the capacity to appreciate beauty, the freedom from attachment, the joy of generous giving, and the inner peace that cannot be disturbed by external circumstances. Ryoan's wealth was not diminished by the theft, because it consisted of qualities that grow stronger when shared rather than weaker. His appreciation of the moon's beauty was not reduced by the loss of his robe. His sense of contentment was not dependent on his possessions. His capacity for compassion was actually enhanced by his encounter with the thief. This teaching challenges our culture's fundamental assumptions about wealth, security, and success. We spend enormous amounts of energy acquiring and protecting material possessions, believing they will provide us with the security and happiness we seek. But as Ryoan understood, the things that can be stolen were never the source of real joy to begin with. The moon that Ryoan wished he could share represents all the treasures that are freely available to anyone with eyes to see the beauty of nature, the miracle of consciousness, the warmth of human connection, the peace of a quiet mind. These riches cannot be bought or sold, cannot be stolen or hoarded, cannot be lost in an economic downturn or natural disaster. Yet, these are precisely the treasures we most often overlook in our pursuit of things that can be possessed. We rush past spectacular sunsets. Because we're checking our phones, we miss opportunities for deep connection. Because we're worried about our image or status, we fail to appreciate the miracle of our own aliveness because we're focused on what we lack, rather than the abundance that surrounds us every moment. Ryoan's response to the thief also demonstrates another form of wealth, the freedom that comes from non-attachment. Because he wasn't identified with his possessions, their loss couldn't disturb his inner peace. Because his sense of self wasn't dependent on what he owned, he could give freely without feeling diminished. This doesn't mean we should be careless with our belongings or that material comfort is unimportant. It means recognizing that our deepest happiness comes from sources that can never be threatened by external circumstances. When we understand this, we can enjoy material pleasures without being enslaved by them. We can work for reasonable security without being consumed by greed, and we can face loss without being devastated by it. As you rest here in the quiet abundance of this moment, feel into your own access to Ryoan's kind of wealth. The breath flowing effortlessly through your body, the miracle of consciousness that can observe your own thoughts, the capacity for peace that emerges when you stop struggling. These treasures are yours right now, requiring no money to purchase, no effort to maintain, no insurance to protect. Notice the moon of contentment that shines in your own inner sky when you stop focusing on what's missing and start appreciating what's present. This is wealth that thieves cannot steal, that economic downturns cannot diminish, that aging cannot erode. It is the treasure that increases the more freely you share it. This understanding of true wealth naturally leads us to explore the question of how to choose wisely among different paths and practices for our own growth and awakening. This insight comes through a teaching story about a confused seeker and a wise master who helped him understand how to select the right vessel for his particular journey. A young man who had been studying various spiritual traditions found himself overwhelmed of approaches available to him. He had practiced different forms of meditation, studied multiple philosophical systems, explored various rituals and ceremonies, and read extensively from many wisdom traditions. Rather than bringing him clarity, this exposure to so many different paths had left him more confused than ever. Each tradition seemed to claim that its approach was the most effective or authentic. Some emphasized rigorous discipline and effort, while others spoke of surrender and letting go. Some focused on developing compassion, others on cultivating wisdom. Some required complex practices, others insisted that simplicity was key. Seeking guidance, the young man traveled to visit a respected Zen master who was known for his practical wisdom. "Master," he said, "I have explored many spiritual paths and practices, but I find myself paralyzed by choice. Each tradition contradicts the others. Each claims to be the true way. How can I know which path is right for me? How can I avoid wasting years following the wrong approach?" The master listened patiently to the young man's dilemma, then led him down to a nearby riverbank where several different types of boats were moored. There were fishing boats designed for working in shallow waters, elegant sailboats built for speed, sturdy cargo vessels meant for heavy loads, and simple rowboats perfect for quiet exploration. "Tell me," the master said, gesturing toward the collection of boats, "which of these is the right boat?" The young man looked puzzled. "The right boat? For what purpose?" "Master, exactly." The master smiled. "Without knowing your destination, the conditions you'll face, and your own capabilities, how could anyone determine which vessel would serve you best? A fishing boat is perfect for catching fish, but terrible for racing. A sailboat is wonderful when the wind is favorable, but useless when there's no breeze. Each boat has its proper function," he continued. "Spiritual practices are like these boats. They are tools designed to carry you across the waters of confusion and suffering to the shore of clarity and peace. But different practices suit different temperaments, different life circumstances, different stages of development. The question is not which practice is universally superior, but which one serves your particular needs at this moment in your journey." The master picked up a small stone and tossed it into the river, watching the ripples spread outward. All genuine spiritual paths, despite their surface differences, share a common purpose: to help us move from suffering toward freedom, from ignorance toward wisdom, from separation toward connection. The outer forms may vary dramatically, but the essential direction is the same. "But how do I choose?" the young man asked. "By paying attention to what actually works in your life," the master replied. "Which practices help you become kinder, wiser, more peaceful? Which teachings resonate not just intellectually, but in your bones? Which approaches help you respond to difficulties with greater skill and less reactivity? Trust your direct experience over theoretical arguments." The master paused, watching the last of the ripples reach the far shore. "And remember, the boat is not the destination. It is a vehicle to carry you across the water. Once you reach the other shore, you don't need to carry the boat on your back. Use whatever practice serves you now, but hold it lightly. Be willing to change boats if your circumstances change, or if you discover that a different approach might serve you better." This teaching offers profound guidance for anyone navigating the sometimes overwhelming array of choices available for personal growth and spiritual development. In our modern world, we have access to wisdom traditions. From every corner of the globe, countless teachers and techniques, libraries full of practices and philosophies. This abundance of options can be a blessing, but it can also create a kind of paralysis. We might spend so much time comparing different approaches that we never commit deeply enough to any one practice to experience its transformative potential. Or we might become so attached to one particular method that we can't adapt when our needs change. The master's boat metaphor suggests a middle way between these extremes. It invites us to approach spiritual practices with both discernment and flexibility, wise enough to choose what serves us, humble enough to recognize that different approaches might suit us at different times. The key insight is that the value of a practice lies not in its reputation or complexity, but in its effectiveness at helping us become more loving, more aware, and more free. Some people find deep peace through silent meditation, others through chanting or movement. Some are drawn to intellectual study, others to devotional practices. Some need structured guidance, others thrive with minimal instruction. This teaching also reminds us that the goal is not to become a perfect meditator or an expert in spiritual philosophy. but to use whatever tools help us live with greater wisdom and compassion. The practices are means, not ends in themselves. As you rest here, in the gentle flow towards sleep, you can appreciate that this very experience of allowing yourself to be carried toward rest is itself a spiritual practice. You are practicing the art of letting go, of trusting in natural processes, of finding peace, not through effort, but through allowing. Whether you call it meditation, prayer, or simply quiet time for reflection, the essence is the same, creating space for the deeper wisdom of your being to emerge. You don't need to choose the perfect practice or follow someone else's exact method. You can trust your own experience of what brings you peace, what opens your heart, what connects you to the mystery and beauty of existence itself. This understanding of trusting our own experience naturally leads us to explore one of the most profound questions in all of spiritual inquiry: the difference between understanding something intellectually and realizing it directly in our bones. This insight comes through the famous teaching about the sound of one hand. In ancient Japan, there lived a Zen master named Hakuin, who was renowned for his skill in guiding students toward direct realization rather than mere conceptual understanding. Among the many teaching tools he employed, his most famous was deceptively simple. What is the sound of one hand? An earnest young monk came to study with Hakuin, eager to penetrate the mysteries of Zen. After a period of preliminary training, the master assigned him this perplexing question: you must discover the sound of one hand. Hakuin instructed, until you truly understand this, you will not understand the heart of Zen. The monk bowed respectfully and retired to contemplate this strange riddle. How could one hand make a sound? Hands clap together to create noise, but a single hand by itself. The young monk applied his considerable intelligence to the problem, certain that, with enough thinking, he could solve this puzzle. After several days of intense contemplation, he returned to the master's quarters confidently. "Master," he announced, "I have found the answer. The sound of one hand is the sound of wind moving through pine trees." Hakuin looked at him with patient eyes. "No," he said simply. "Continue your inquiry." Somewhat deflated, but still determined, the monk returned to his meditation. Perhaps he had been thinking too literally. A week later, he came back with a different answer. "Master, the sound of one hand is the sound of water flowing over rocks in a mountain stream." Again, Hakuin shook his head. "That is still the sound of something external. Go deeper." Month after month, the monk returned with various answers: the cry of a hawk circling overhead, the rustle of bamboo leaves in the breeze, the distant ringing of temple bells. Each time the master gently rejected his response and sent him back to continue his investigation. As the seasons changed, something began to shift in the monk's approach. He gradually stopped trying to find clever, intellectual answers, and instead allowed the question itself to penetrate deeper into his being. Instead of thinking about the problem, he began to live with it, to let it work on him rather than working on it. One morning, after many months of this deepening inquiry, the monk was sitting in meditation when something extraordinary happened. The question and the questioner seemed to dissolve into each other. There was no longer a separate self trying to solve a riddle. There was simply an immediate wordless understanding that transcended all concepts. When he next met with Hakuin, the master posed the familiar question: "What is the sound of one hand?" The monk's response came not in words, but in presence itself, a direct demonstration of understanding that needed no explanation. His entire being expressed the reality that the question pointed toward beyond any intellectual formulation. Hakuin smiled with deep satisfaction. Now you have moved beyond seeking answers to embodying understanding. He said this is the difference between knowing about the moon and being illuminated by moonlight. This teaching reveals something crucial about the nature of wisdom and spiritual realization. There is a fundamental difference between understanding concepts about reality and directly experiencing that reality itself. Intellectual knowledge, however sophisticated, remains second-hand information. Direct realization is immediate, wordless, and transformative. The sound of one hand cannot be understood through thinking because it points towards something that exists before thought divides experience into separate categories. It represents the undivided nature of reality itself, the state of awareness that exists before we split the world into subject and object, self and other, question and answer. The monk's journey from intellectual seeking to direct realization parallels the path that all genuine spiritual inquiry must take. We naturally begin by trying to understand with our minds, collecting concepts and comparisons, analyzing and categorizing. This intellectual phase has its value. It can point us in the right direction and help us avoid certain pitfalls. But at some point, if we want to taste the reality that the concepts point toward, we must be willing to move beyond mental understanding into direct experience. This transition often feels like a kind of death to the mind that insists on knowing through thinking. It requires a willingness to not know, in the conventional sense, to rest in the mystery rather than solving it. This applies not just to formal spiritual practice, but to all areas of life where genuine understanding matters. You can read about love extensively, but this doesn't substitute for the direct experience of loving and being loved. You can study descriptions of peace, but this is entirely different from the lived reality of a peaceful mind. You can analyze techniques for presence, but presence itself is immediate and simple, requiring no technique at all. As you rest in this moment, you have an opportunity to move beyond concepts about relaxation into the direct experience of allowing your body and mind to soften. You don't need to understand how sleep works or remember techniques for letting go. You can simply be here, letting natural processes carry you deeper into rest. This is the sound of one hand, not something you figure out, but something you are. When you stop trying to figure anything out at all, it is the peace that exists before you think about peace. The awareness that is present before you become aware of being aware. The rest that is always available when you stop efforting toward rest. Feel into this direct simplicity. Let your breathing happen without management. Let your thoughts come and go without engagement. Let yourself be carried by the same intelligence that grows your hair and heals your wounds and knows exactly how to restore you through sleep. This is not a concept to understand, but a reality to surrender into as natural and immediate as the sound of one hand. As we continue deeper into this gentle exploration of ancient wisdom, we encounter a teaching that reveals how the sacred and the ordinary are not separate realms, but different ways of seeing the same reality. This insight comes to us through the story of a Zen master who found profound truth in the most unexpected place, a muddy road that his students had dismissed as merely dirty and unpleasant. A respected Zen master was traveling with a group of his disciples along a country road During the rainy season, the path had been transformed by recent storms into a muddy, difficult journey that challenged even experienced travelers. As they walked mindfully, paying careful attention to each step to avoid slipping in the treacherous conditions, they came upon a magnificent temple situated on a hill overlooking the road. The temple was a masterpiece of architecture and devotion, its golden roof gleaming in the filtered sunlight, its walls adorned with intricate carvings that spoke of centuries of craftsmanship and spiritual dedication. The gardens surrounding it were meticulously maintained, with every stone and plant placed with perfect precision. Inside, they could see priests in immaculate white robes conducting elaborate ceremonies with movements so refined they seemed like sacred dance. The disciples were deeply impressed by this display of spiritual beauty and discipline. After observing the ceremonies and wandering through the pristine gardens, they gathered around their master outside the temple grounds, eager to hear his thoughts on what they had witnessed. "Master," one student asked with reverence, "what do you think of this magnificent temple and its practices? Surely this represents the highest expression of spiritual devotion. Is this not the perfect environment for achieving enlightenment?" Instead of answering immediately, the master led his students back down the hill to the muddy road they had been traveling. He stopped at a particularly messy section where the recent rains had created deep puddles mixed with earth, where countless feet and wagon wheels had churned the ground into something that appeared thoroughly unpleasant and common. The master knelt down beside this muddy patch and, to his students' surprise, placed his hand directly into the wet earth. With his finger, he slowly drew a perfect circle in the mud, then sat back and looked at his disciples with eyes that sparkled with quiet joy. "The truth," he said gently, "can be found here as well." The students stood in confused silence, trying to understand what their teacher was showing them. How could this dirty, uncomfortable road contain the same spiritual potential as the beautiful temple they had just visited? What wisdom could possibly be found in mud and inconvenience? The master continued, his voice carrying the warmth of deep understanding. That magnificent temple, with its golden ornaments and perfect ceremonies, is indeed beautiful, and the devotion of its priests is admirable. But if you believe that truth exists only in special places, in perfect conditions, surrounded by beauty and free from difficulty, then you have missed the most important teaching of all. He gestured to the circle he had drawn in the mud. This earth beneath our feet, this inconvenient road, this messy and imperfect journey we are walking, this too is sacred ground. The Buddha nature that you seek in temples is fully present here, in this moment, in this exact circumstance, regardless of whether conditions meet your preferences. One student ventured, "But surely, Master, it is easier to find peace and clarity in quiet places than in difficult, uncomfortable ones." The master smiled. And there lies the trap of spiritual materialism, believing that awakening depends on having the right external conditions. When you can find the sacred only in temples, you remain dependent on temples. When you can access peace only in perfect circumstances, you remain at the mercy of circumstances. But when you discover that every moment, every place, every situation contains the fullness of reality, then you are truly free. He stood brushing the mud from his hands. "The circle I drew in this earth is no less perfect than the golden ornaments we saw in that temple. The awareness that watches our discomfort on this muddy road is no different from the awareness that appreciates beautiful ceremonies. If you cannot find Buddha here in the midst of inconvenience and imperfection, where do you expect to find Buddha at all? This teaching strikes at the heart of one of our most persistent illusions, the belief that spiritual realization requires special conditions. We imagine that we will find peace when our lives become less chaotic, that we will develop wisdom when we have more time for contemplation, that we will access our deeper nature when we escape from the messiness of ordinary existence. But the Muddy Road teaching reveals that this approach fundamentally misunderstands the nature of awakening. Our true nature is not hiding somewhere else, waiting for perfect conditions to reveal itself. It is here now, in the midst of whatever difficulties or imperfections we are facing. The sacred is not absent from the mundane. The mundane is the sacred seen clearly. This understanding transforms our relationship with the difficult aspects of our lives. The stressful commute becomes an opportunity to practice patience. The challenging relationship becomes a teacher of compassion. The physical discomfort of illness becomes a lesson in non-attachment. The anxious mind becomes a laboratory for understanding the nature of thought itself. This doesn't mean we stop working to improve our circumstances, or that we should seek out suffering unnecessarily. It means recognizing that our capacity for peace, wisdom, and love is not dependent on having ideal conditions. These qualities are available right now in the midst of whatever muddy road we find ourselves traveling. As you rest here, in this moment, perhaps you can feel into this directly. You don't need perfect silence to find inner quiet. You don't need complete physical comfort to access peace. You don't need to solve all your problems to touch the spacious awareness that witnesses both problems and solutions with equal serenity. The circle of completeness exists right here, right now, drawn not in temple gold, but in the simple earth of your immediate experience. Your breathing, your heartbeat, these are no less sacred than any ceremony or ritual. This moment, exactly as it is, contains everything you need for the deepest realization. This recognition of the sacred within the ordinary naturally leads us to explore another profound teaching about the nature of true presence. This understanding comes through the story of a Zen master who taught his restless student the deepest lesson through the simple act of eating a strawberry. A young monk came to his teacher with a heart full of spiritual longing, but also heavy with frustration. Despite years of dedicated practice, his mind remained restless and scattered. In meditation, thoughts would arise like storms, carrying him away from the present moment. Throughout his daily activities, he found himself constantly distracted by worries about the future and regrets about the past. "Master," he said with evident distress, "I have been practicing diligently for years, yet my mind is still wild and uncontrolled." When I sit in meditation, I am overwhelmed by thinking. When I try to be mindful during my daily tasks, I find myself lost in mental commentary about everything I'm doing. How can I find the peace that seems so elusive? What am I doing wrong? The master listened with patient attention, understanding the sincere anguish in his student's voice. This was not mere intellectual curiosity, but the genuine cry of someone who longed for freedom from the tyranny of an agitated mind. "Come with me," the master said simply. "I want to show you something." He led his student out of the monastery and onto a mountain path, Room's path, that wound through forests and meadows toward a high cliff. They walked in silence for nearly an hour, the student's mind continuing its familiar patterns of worry and analysis. even as they moved through landscapes of extraordinary beauty. When they reached a rocky outcropping that offered a breathtaking view of the valley below, the master gestured for his student to sit beside him on the warm stone. Far below, a river wound through forests and fields, its surface catching the afternoon light scattered diamonds. From within his simple robes, the master produced 2 perfectly ripe strawberries, their red color vivid against the grey stone. He placed one in front of each of them and said quietly, "Eat." The student looked puzzled. He had come seeking profound teachings about meditation and enlightenment, and his teacher was offering him fruit. But having learned to trust his master's guidance, he picked up the strawberry and took a bite. Sweet, tart, intensely fragrant. It seemed to contain the essence of sunlight and rain, of earth and time itself. As he continued eating, something remarkable happened. For these few moments, his mind became completely absorbed in the immediate experience. The familiar stream of thoughts slowed and then stopped entirely. There was only the taste, the texture, the simple miracle of this perfect berry. When they had both finished eating, the master asked gently, "While you were eating that strawberry, where was your restless mind?" The student reflected for a moment, a look of wonder crossing his face. "It was nowhere," he said slowly. "I was completely here. There were no thoughts about the past or future, no commentary about my spiritual progress, no worry about whether I was doing it right. There was only the strawberry." And during those moments, the master continued, "Were you troubled by the agitation you usually experience? Did you feel the mental suffering you described to me?" "No," the student replied, with growing amazement. There was complete peace, but it was so simple, so ordinary. I was just present. The master smiled with the warmth of someone sharing a treasure beyond price. This is the peace you seek. It is not found by eliminating thoughts or achieving some special meditative state. It is discovered in complete presence with whatever is actually here, whether that is a strawberry, a breath, a sound, or even a difficult emotion. When you are fully present, past and future cease to torment you because they exist only in thought. The student sat in thoughtful silence, beginning to understand that he had been making his practice far more complicated than it needed to be. He had been trying to create some ideal state of mind, rather than simply being present to what was already here. "But what about when I face something unpleasant?" he asked. "It's easy to be present with a delicious strawberry. What about pain or fear or sadness?" "The same presence is available," the master replied with gentle confidence. "The nature of what you face may change, but the quality of awareness you bring to it need not change. Whether you are experiencing joy or sorrow, pleasure or pain, the capacity for complete presence is always here. This is your greatest freedom. Not the ability to control what arises, but the ability to meet whatever arises with full accepting awareness. This teaching reveals the profound simplicity that lies at the heart of all genuine spiritual practice. We often make the path to peace unnecessarily complicated, imagining that we need special techniques, perfect conditions, or years of intensive training to access our natural state of calm awareness. But the strawberry teaching shows us that presence is not an achievement, but our most basic capacity. Every moment offers us the opportunity to be completely here, to drop our mental commentary and analysis, and simply experience what is actually happening right now. The student's transformation through eating the strawberry demonstrates something crucial about the nature of mind. When we are fully absorbed in immediate experience, the usual patterns of worry, regret, and mental proliferation naturally subside. Not because we have forced them to stop, but because we have found something more compelling than our thoughts. The richness of direct experience itself. This presence is available not just with pleasant experiences like strawberries, but with whatever is arising in this moment. The feeling of tiredness as your body settles towards sleep can be met with the same quality of attention. The sounds around you, the sensations of warmth or coolness, the natural rhythm of your breathing, all of these can become doorways into the same complete presence that the student discovered. As you rest here now, you can taste this teaching directly. Instead of thinking about presence or trying to achieve a peaceful state, you can simply be present to the immediate simplicity of this experience, the weight of your body, the softness of your breath, the quiet space between thoughts. These are your strawberries, offering the same gateway to peace that has been available in every moment you have ever lived. This understanding of presence naturally flows into another profound realization about the nature of our seeking itself. Sometimes the very thing we are searching for is obscured by our desperate need to find it. This insight comes through a beautiful teaching about a sacred mountain that was never different from ordinary ground. There lived a young scholar named Wei who had devoted years to studying spiritual texts from every tradition he could find. His library contained countless volumes on meditation, philosophy, and the nature of enlightenment. He had memorized sacred verses, analyzed complex theories, and engaged in profound debates with other learned seekers. Despite his vast knowledge, we felt that something essential was missing. All his intellectual understanding felt hollow compared to the direct experience of truth that the texts seemed to point toward. He had studied descriptions of enlightenment, but had never tasted it himself. He understood concepts about peace, but remained inwardly agitated and searching. Having heard of a great Zen master who lived as a hermit on a mountain that was considered sacred by spiritual seekers, Wei decided to make the arduous journey to seek direct transmission of the wisdom that had eluded his scholarly approach. The mountain was indeed formidable. Steep paths wound through dense forests, across rushing streams, and up rocky precipices that challenged every step. The journey took days of difficult travel, during which Wei's anticipation grew. Surely, at the summit, in the presence of this legendary master, he would finally encounter the profound truth that all his study had only described. When he finally reached the simple hut where the master lived, he was received with quiet kindness. After they had shared a humble meal of rice and vegetables, Wei explained the purpose of his pilgrimage with earnest intensity. "Master," he said, "I have studied the teachings extensively, but remain hungry for direct experience of the ultimate truth. I have come to this sacred mountain to ask, what is enlightenment? What is the final goal of all spiritual seeking? Please share with me the supreme wisdom that can only be transmitted from master to student." The old master looked at him with eyes that held depths of understanding. "Before I answer your question," he said, "would you like some tea?" Wei nodded, though he was eager to get to the profound teachings he had traveled so far to receive. As the master prepared tea with unhurried movements, he asked casually, "Tell me, what did you notice during your journey up the mountain?" Wei thought back over his climb. "Well, the path was quite challenging," he said. "There were steep sections that required careful attention. places where I had to rest to catch my breath. I had to navigate around fallen trees and cross several streams. And what else did you observe? The master inquired as he poured the tea. There were moments of great beauty, we admitted. Ancient pine trees that must have stood for centuries, wild flowers blooming in hidden meadows, a hawk circling overhead on thermal currents. At one point I reached a clearing that offered a spectacular view of the valleys below. The master handed him a cup of tea and settled beside him at the entrance to the humble dwelling. From this simple vantage point, they could see the same magnificent landscape that we had glimpsed during his ascent. Mountains rolling away to the horizon, clouds drifting across an endless sky, the intricate patterns of forest and field stretching as far as the eye could see. After they had sipped their tea in comfortable silence for some time, the master spoke again. The ultimate truth you seek was present in every step of your journey up this mountain. It was in the difficulty of the climb and in the beauty you witnessed. It was in your moments of rest and in your effort to continue. It is here now, in this cup of tea in the vast sky before us, in the simple awareness that can observe all these experiences arising. We looked puzzled, but surely there must be some special teaching, some profound realization that is different from ordinary experience. Why else would this mountain be considered sacred? The master gestured toward the panoramic view spread before them. Tell me, is this mountain more sacred than the hill where you were born? Are these trees more holy than those that grow in your village? Is this moment more filled with ultimate truth than every other moment of your life? As we contemplated these questions, something began to shift in his understanding. Are you saying that what I have been seeking is not hidden here on this special mountain? I am saying, the master replied, with infinite gentleness, that you believed it was hidden here, and so the journey was necessary. Sometimes we must exhaust our seeking in order to discover what was never absent. The spiritual path is not about finding what is missing, but about recognizing what is always present, he continued. This mountain you call sacred is made of the same earth as every other mountain. This air you breathe here is the same air you breathe everywhere. This sky above us is the same sky that covers your home. What makes this place seem special is not the location itself, but the quality of attention you have brought to it through your sincere seeking. I sat in profound silence, feeling years of frantic searching beginning to settle into something deeper and more restful. The master continued, the truth you seek is not a special experience or a mystical state. It is the simple recognition of what is already here, the awareness in which all experiences arise, the consciousness that can observe both seeking and finding with equal clarity. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in subtle colors, we understood something that no amount of study could have taught him. The sacred was not separate from the ordinary. The ultimate truth was not hidden on distant mountains, but was the very ground of every moment, every breath, every simple experience of being alive. This teaching about the sacred mountain reveals one of the most liberating insights available to human consciousness. We spend so much energy seeking special experiences, perfect teachers, ideal conditions for awakening. We imagine that truth exists somewhere else, in some other circumstance, accessible only through extraordinary effort or rare opportunities. But the mountain teaching shows us that this very seeking, while sincere and understandable, is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. What we seek through spiritual practice is not absent from our ordinary experience. It is the very ground and substance of that experience temporarily overlooked in our search for something more special. This doesn't mean that practice is pointless, or that teachers and teachings have no value. Like Way's journey up the mountain, our seeking serves an important purpose. It exhausts the mind's need to find truth somewhere else, leading us eventually to recognize what was present all along. The practices we engage in, the books we read, the teachers we learn from, these are like the difficult path up the mountain. They serve their purpose not by giving us something new, but by helping us recognize what we already are. They are fingers pointing at the moon of our own awareness, helpful until we see the moon directly. As you rest in this moment, you can feel into this recognition directly, the awareness that is reading these words, the consciousness that can observe your own thoughts and feelings, the simple capacity for experience itself. This is not something you will achieve through practice. It is what you are right now, prior to all seeking and finding. The sacred mountain exists wherever you are willing to bring complete attention to your immediate experience. This breath, this heartbeat, this moment of simply being aware, these are no less profound than any mystical experience described in ancient texts. They are the ordinary miracle of existence itself, available in every moment, but typically overlooked in our search for something more exotic. Let this understanding carry you deeper into rest, knowing that the peace you seek is not waiting for you somewhere in the future, but is the very awareness in which this moment of seeking arises. You don't need to travel to sacred mountains or achieve special states of consciousness. You can rest right here, right now, in the simple recognition of what has never been absent, the luminous awareness that you are. This recognition of our own immediate completeness naturally leads us to explore the art of skillful action in the world. When we understand that we are already whole, the question becomes not how to achieve enlightenment for ourselves, but how to express our inherent wisdom and compassion in our interactions with others. This understanding comes through a story about an old monk whose response to theft revealed the deepest teaching about true generosity and the unshakable nature of genuine contentment. Unlike the earlier story of Rion, this tale explores how our responses to others' actions can become opportunities for profound teaching and healing. There lived an elderly monk named Joshu who had devoted his entire life to understanding the deepest truths of existence. His years of practice had led him to a state of such profound contentment that he needed almost nothing to be happy. Just simple food, basic clothing, and a quiet place to rest. His few possessions were worn and humble, but his inner wealth was apparent to anyone who spent time in his presence. Late one night, a desperate man broke into Joshu's modest dwelling, hoping to find something valuable to steal. His own life had been marked by poverty and difficulty, and he had convinced himself that taking from others was his only hope for survival. As the thief searched through Joshu's meager possessions by candlelight, the old monk awakened. Instead of fear or anger, Joshu felt only compassion for someone driven to such actions by whatever pain or desperation he must be experiencing. Quietly, so as not to startle the intruder, Joshu said, "Friend, you are welcome to anything you find here that might be useful to you, but I'm afraid there is nothing of monetary value in this humble place." The thief spun around, expecting confrontation or calls for help, but instead found himself looking into eyes filled with genuine kindness. This unexpected response completely disarmed him. However, Joshu continued gently, "Since you have come so far and put yourself at risk to visit me, I would hate for you to leave empty-handed. Please take my winter robe. The weather is growing cold, and you look as though you might need warm clothing more than I do." The thief stood speechless in all his desperate acts of theft. No one had ever responded with generosity instead of fear or anger. Something in the old monk's sincere concern for his well-being touched a part of his heart that had been closed for years. "But why?" the thief asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why would you give freely what I came to steal?" Joshu smiled, with the warmth of someone who had discovered an inexhaustible source of joy. "Because, my friend, the only thing worth possessing is that which cannot be stolen. Everything else, clothing, money, even this old body belongs to the world, and will return to the world in due time. What I truly am, what brings me genuine happiness, cannot be taken by anyone." The thief accepted the robe with trembling hands. But more than the gift itself, he was transformed by the recognition that such selfless kindness was possible. He had approached expecting to take something from this man, but instead had received something far more valuable, a glimpse of a way of being in the world that he had never imagined. "What is it that cannot be stolen?" the thief asked, genuinely curious now, rather than desperate. "The capacity to love," Joshu replied simply. "The ability to find joy in simple things. The peace that comes from wanting nothing more than what life offers. The understanding that giving and receiving are not separate actions, but the same movement of an open heart. These treasures grow stronger when shared, rather than weaker when given away." Years later, that former thief had become known in the region as a person of extraordinary generosity and kindness. He would often tell people that his life truly began not when he learned to take what he needed, but when he encountered someone who showed him what it meant to give freely from an understanding of abundance rather than scarcity. This story reveals something profound about the nature of true security and genuine wealth. We spend enormous energy protecting what we believe makes us safe: our possessions, our reputation, our sense of identity. But Joshu's teaching shows us that the things we try so hard to protect were never the source of our real well-being to begin with. The security that comes from external circumstances is always fragile. It depends on conditions remaining favorable, on other people behaving as we hope they will, on our ability to control outcomes that are ultimately beyond our control. This kind of security requires constant vigilance and creates constant anxiety. But the security that Joshua embodied comes from a different source entirely. It flows from the recognition that our deepest happiness doesn't depend on what we can accumulate or preserve, but on qualities of heart and mind that grow stronger through use rather than weaker through sharing. When we give from scarcity consciousness, we feel depleted. When we give from abundance consciousness, we feel enriched. The difference lies not in how much we have, but in our understanding of what constitutes real wealth. Love shared doubles rather than halves. Kindness offered returns, multiplied. Peace extended creates more peace in the world. This understanding transforms our relationship not only with giving, but with receiving as well. When we know that our well-being doesn't depend on external conditions, we can receive both gifts and challenges with equal equanimity. Praise cannot make us fundamentally happier because our joy comes from a deeper source. Criticism cannot destroy us because our worth is not dependent on others' opinions. As you settle deeper into rest, feel into your own capacity for this kind of unshakable contentment. What is it in your life that cannot be stolen by changed circumstances? What aspects of your being grow stronger when shared rather than weaker when given away? Perhaps it is your capacity for awareness itself, the simple miracle of being conscious, of being able to experience this moment. Perhaps it is your ability to feel gratitude, to appreciate beauty, to extend kindness to others. These qualities of your essential nature are completely secure, not because they are protected from change, but because they are not dependent on external conditions for their existence. This is the treasure that Joshu offered to share with the thief, not just a warm robe for his body, but a glimpse into a way of being that is invulnerable to loss because it is founded on the recognition of what can never be taken away. This same treasure is available to you right now, not as something to be achieved through practice, but as the very ground of your being, temporarily obscured by the assumption that your well-being depends on circumstances aligning in your favor. Rest in this understanding, letting it carry you into the deeper rest that comes when you stop trying to protect what was never in danger, and instead surrender into the security of your own boundless nature. As we approach the deepest part of our journey together, we come to understand that all these teachings have been pointing toward a single profound recognition that the peace we seek, the wisdom we long for, and the love we hope to embody are not distant goals to be achieved, but the very ground of our being, temporarily obscured by our searching itself. This ultimate understanding comes to us through the teaching of the master archer, who discovered that true skill lies not in trying harder, but in disappearing into the action itself. There once lived an archer whose reputation had spread throughout the land. His arrows flew with such precision that they seemed guided by an invisible hand, never missing their intended mark. Students came from distant provinces hoping to learn the secret of his extraordinary ability, certain that he possessed some special technique or hidden knowledge that elevated him above ordinary practitioners. One day, a young archer who had achieved considerable skill through years of dedicated practice approached this legendary master. The student's technique was flawless by conventional standards. His stance was perfect, his draw smooth and consistent, his aim precise by any measure, yet he sensed that something essential remained beyond his grasp. "Master," the young man said with deep respect, "I have trained diligently and achieved what many consider great skill. My arrows hit their targets consistently, and others praise my technique. But when I watch you shoot, I sense a quality that transcends mere accuracy. Please, share with me the secret that makes your arrows fly as if they were guided by the very spirit of archery itself." The master looked at this earnest student with understanding eyes. "Tomorrow at dawn, meet me at the cliff overlooking Eagle Valley," he said. "Bring your bow and your finest arrows." When the student arrived at the appointed place, he found the master standing at the very edge of a precipice that dropped hundreds of feet to the rocky valley floor. One misstep would mean certain death, yet the master stood there as calmly as if he were in his own garden. From this precarious position, the master drew his bow and sent an arrow sailing toward a distant target. His form was relaxed yet perfectly aligned, his breathing steady, his release so smooth it seemed effortless. The arrow found its mark with absolute precision. The master then turned to his student. "Now you shoot from here. the young archer approached the cliff edge and immediately felt his confidence evaporate. The dizzying height triggered waves of fear that coursed through his body. His heart raced, his hands trembled, and his carefully practiced technique crumbled under the weight of terror. The very skills that had served him so well in safe circumstances now seemed utterly inadequate. After several failed attempts, the student stepped back from the edge, his face pale with anxiety. "I cannot shoot from there, Master. The fear of falling overwhelms everything I have learned. How can I focus on the target when I am terrified for my life?" The master nodded with compassion. "Now you begin to understand the difference between technique and mastery. Your skills are excellent, but they serve a divided mind. Part of you shoots the arrow while another part fears the cliff, hopes for success, worries about your reputation, and remains constantly aware of itself. As the one who is shooting," he gestured toward the vast expanse of sky and valley spread before them. "When I shoot, there is no separate I standing apart from the action. There is no fear, because there is no one to be afraid. There is no hope for success, because there is no one to succeed or fail. There is only the bow, the arrow, the target, and the natural law that guides them together. In that unity, missing becomes impossible." The student listened with growing wonder as the master continued. "You have been practicing archery as if you were someone doing something to something else. But true mastery dissolves these artificial boundaries. The archer, the bow, the arrow, and the target are revealed to be aspects of a single, seamless reality. When you disappear into this unity, your arrows fly with the precision of natural law itself. This teaching about the master archer reveals the deepest secret of all skillful action, whether in archery, in daily life, or in the art of living itself. Most of us approach our activities with what we might call a divided mind. Part of us engaged in the task, while another part stands aside, commenting, evaluating, hoping, fearing, and maintaining a constant sense of separation between the doer and the deed. This division creates friction, tension, and inefficiency in everything we attempt. When we are having a conversation, part of us listens while another part prepares what we will say next. When we are working, part of us focuses on the task, while another part worries about how our performance will be judged. When we are trying to rest, part of us seeks sleep, while another part remains vigilantly aware of whether we are successfully falling asleep. But there are moments in everyone's life when this division temporarily dissolves. The musician becomes one with the music. The athlete enters the zone. The artist disappears into the creative process. In these moments, action flows naturally and effortlessly from a deeper source, unimpeded by self-consciousness or mental interference. The master archer had learned to access this state of unified awareness at will. For him, shooting an arrow was not about someone doing something, but about allowing natural laws to express themselves through the temporary form of his body and bow. This is why the cliff held no terror for him. There was no separate self to be endangered, only the seamless flow of cause and effect. This teaching points toward the ultimate understanding that underlies all Buddhist wisdom, the recognition that the sense of being a separate self who must control life is the root illusion that creates suffering. When this illusion is seen through, what remains is not emptiness or nothingness, but the vibrant, dynamic flow of existence itself, temporarily taking the form of your particular life. As you rest here in the growing quiet of sleep, you can taste this unity directly. in the deeper stages of relaxation, the usual sense of being someone who is trying to sleep begins to fade. There is simply the natural process of rest unfolding, with no one standing aside to monitor or control it. This is the archer's mind, present but not separate, aware but not divided, completely engaged, yet utterly effortless. Feel into this dissolution of the watcher and the watched, the sleeper and the process of sleeping. Let yourself disappear into the seamless flow of rest, trusting the same intelligence that knows how to beat your heart and grow your head to carry you into the restorative depths of sleep. This understanding of unified awareness naturally leads us to the final recognition that all these teachings have been pointing toward the understanding that what we have been seeking through practice was never actually missing. This ultimate insight comes through a teaching that brings together everything we have explored, showing how the journey itself was the destination all along. There is a story who was known for guiding students to the deepest realizations with the gentlest means. Unlike masters who used dramatic methods or harsh disciplines, this teacher helped people discover their true nature through the most ordinary experiences, showing them that what they sought was hidden in plain sight. One evening, as the teacher sat with a small group of devoted students in a simple courtyard under the vast canopy of stars, one of them posed the question that had been burning in all their hearts. Master, after all our years of practice, study, and inquiry, what is the ultimate truth? What is the final realization that makes all seeking unnecessary? The teacher sat in comfortable silence for a long while, listening to the gentle sounds of the night, crickets singing, a distant stream flowing, the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying the warmth of infinite understanding. You ask about the ultimate truth, as if it was something other than this moment, he said gently. You seek a final realization, as if it were different from your present awareness. But what if I told you that what you have been looking for has been looking through your eyes this entire time? The students leaned forward, eager to grasp this teaching that seemed to promise the end of all their searching. The consciousness that is these words. Right now, the teacher continued, the awareness that can observe your own thoughts and feelings, the simple capacity to experience this moment. This is not a stepping stone to enlightenment. This is enlightenment itself, temporarily playing at being a seeker. One student protested, but Master, my mind is still restless. I still get angry, still feel fear, still struggle with desires. How can this ordinary awareness be the ultimate truth? The teacher smiled with infinite patience. Does the sky cease to be the sky when clouds pass through it? Does the ocean cease to be the ocean when waves rise on its surface? Your thoughts, emotions, and experiences are like weather patterns moving through the vast space of awareness. They do not stain or damage that which witnesses them. He gestured toward the star-filled expanse above them. Look at this night sky. It contains everything. Bright stars and dark spaces, the moon and passing clouds, the visible and the invisible. It rejects nothing and clings to nothing. It simply provides the space within which all phenomena arise and pass away. Your true nature is like this sky, he continued. It is the open awareness within which all experiences unfold. Sometimes there are pleasant experiences, sometimes difficult ones. Sometimes the mind is calm, sometimes agitated. Sometimes there is clarity, sometimes confusion. But the awareness that knows all these changing states, remains unchanging, like the sky that holds all weather with equal space. Another student asked, then what has all our practice been for? Why have we studied and meditated and sought to understand these teachings if we were already what we were seeking? The teacher's eyes sparkled with gentle humor. Why does the sun rise each morning? Not because the darkness needs to be fought, but because it is the sun's nature to shine. Your practice has not created your Buddha nature. It has simply been the natural expression of that nature, recognizing itself. He paused, allowing this understanding to settle into their hearts. A wave does not practice being ocean. It already is ocean, temporarily taking the form of a wave. You do not practice to become aware. You are awareness itself temporarily, playing the role of a practitioner. Your seeking has been the activity of what you sought, trying to remember what it never actually forgot. As the night deepened around them, the teacher offered one final pointing. Right now, in this very moment, notice the awareness that is aware of my words. Don't think about it or analyze it. Simply be the awareness that is already present. This awareness has been with you your entire life. It was present when you were a child. It is present now, and it will be present in your final breath. It requires no maintenance, no practice, no improvement. It is simply what you are. The peace you have been seeking is this awareness at rest. The wisdom you have been pursuing is this awareness recognizing its own nature. The love you have been trying to cultivate is this awareness's natural response to recognizing itself in all beings. You are not separate from what you seek. You are what you seek. Temporarily dreaming of separation. In the profound silence that followed these words, something shifted in each student's understanding. They realized that their years of practice had not been about acquiring something new, but about removing the obstacles to recognizing what had always been present. They were like people who had been searching frantically for their glasses while wearing them, or looking for the sun with a flashlight. This final teaching brings together all the wisdom we have explored throughout our journey together. Every story, every insight, every practice has been pointing toward this simple recognition. Seeking to be fixed or an incomplete being, trying to become whole. You are consciousness itself, temporarily taking the form of a human life, complete and perfect in your essential nature. All the difficulties you experience, all the challenges you face, all the emotions you feel, are like waves on the surface of an ocean. They are real and they matter, but they do not define the depths of what you are. The awareness that witnesses your struggles is not touched by them. Just as the sky is not damaged by storms, this understanding transforms everything without changing anything. Your human life continues, with its joys and sorrows, its victories and defeats, its moments of clarity and periods of confusion. But now you know, these are all temporary expressions of the one awareness that you are playing in countless forms, yet never truly divided from itself. As you rest here in this profound recognition, feel into the simplicity of just being aware. You don't need to do anything with this awareness, improve it or use it to achieve any special states. Simply rest as the awareness that you already are, letting it hold whatever arises with the same natural acceptance. That space holds all objects. Your breathing continues effortlessly. Your heart beats without your direction. Your body knows how to rest and restore itself. These are all expressions of the same intelligence that you are taking care of this temporary form that awareness has chosen to inhabit for a brief time. Let yourself sink into this deepest rest. not the rest of someone trying to sleep, but the rest of awareness recognizing its own natural state. You are not separate from the peace you seek. You are the peace itself temporarily wearing, the costume of a seeker now finally coming home to yourself. In this recognition, seeking ends, not because you have found what you were looking for, but because you have realized you were never lost. Practice continues not because you need to become enlightened, but because it is the natural play of enlightenment, expressing itself through the form of your life. Rest. Now in this understanding, letting it carry you into the deepest sleep, not as escape from yourself, but as return to yourself, not as unconsciousness, but as pure consciousness at rest, dreaming the dreams that restore and heal the body, while never leaving the eternal wakefulness that you are. May you rest in the peace that passes understanding, knowing it is not separate from you, but is your very essence. May you wake refreshed in the morning, with this recognition still glowing quietly in your heart. The understanding that you are already what you have always been seeking, playing the beautiful game of forgetting and remembering, losing yourself and finding yourself in the eternal dance of consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature.